The first time Mara Vin heard a rifle safety click inside a classroom, nobody else noticed. 23 students were arguing about a history assignment. A cleaning drone hummed beneath the back row. Rain ticked softly against the tall glass windows of Meridian Institute, 300 meters above the silver streets of Cairo Station. Professor Ilian was halfway through saying that the war had ended because both sides had finally understood the cost. Then came that tiny metallic sound. Clicking. Mara stopped breathing. She knew that sound better than she knew the school bell. She had heard it in trenches dug into frozen moons. She had heard it behind cargo crates while waiting for boarding teams. She had heard it once in the dark, less than a second before the man beside her died. The classroom kept talking. Mara looked toward the door. A uniformed galactic security officer stood outside, one hand beneath his coat. And for the first time since she had come home, Mara understood something that frightened her more than the war ever had. She had not returned to school because the war was over. She had returned just in time for something else to begin. Set up. 6 weeks earlier, Mara had arrived at Meridian carrying one duffel bag, 3 textbooks she had not opened in 4 years, and a paper envelope she kept folded inside the inner pocket of her coat. The envelope contained her discharge certificate. She hated touching it. The paper itself was almost ridiculous. The military had fleets that could cross a solar system in hours. Hospital machines could rebuild nerves. Navigation computers could predict the position of a moving asteroid 2 months before anyone saw it. Yet, when the Terran Expeditionary Service released a soldier from duty, they still gave her a sheet of textured paper with her name pressed into it in black ink. Mara suspected someone in government thought paper made things feel official. Mostly it made her feel old. She was 26. At 19, she had enrolled at Meridian Institute to study structural engineering. At 20, the Karth Dominion crossed the Helix line and attacked 3 treaty worlds. By 21, the civilian draft had expanded, and Mara was wearing gray combat armor on a transport headed toward a place called Vera's Reach. Now the Karth Dominion had collapsed. The armistice had been signed. The surviving generals gave interviews. Politicians used phrases like lasting peace and shared reconstruction. Soldiers were sent home in waves. Mara came back to discover that her student account still existed. Her old profile photograph showed a thin girl with long black hair and a grin that looked almost aggressive in its optimism. The woman who stood at the admissions kiosk had a short, uneven haircut, a pale scar under her jaw, and a left hand that trembled whenever she was tired. The admissions machine took 12 seconds to confirm her identity. Then it said in a bright synthetic voice, "Welcome back, Student Ven." Mara stared at it. Behind her, someone cleared his throat. She moved aside. That was her first day back. Meridian Institute occupied the upper terraces of Cairo Station, a neutral educational colony orbiting the ocean planet Selene. The campus had been built in layers over 2 centuries. Its oldest halls were stone and wood brought from Earth and other founding worlds. Its newest buildings were narrow towers of transparent alloy threaded with gardens, study decks, laboratories, drone lanes, and gravity elevators. On clear mornings, students could stand on the eastern promenade and look down through 30 kilometers of atmosphere at Selene's blue surface. Mara remembered loving that view. After the war, heights did not bother her. Crowds did. The first morning she walked through the central forum, nearly 2,000 students were moving between lecture halls. Humans mixed with Vayari, Orinth, Draxel, Fen, Callan, and species Mara had never encountered before the fighting. Some wore translation collars. Some wore pressure scarves. A pair of amphibious students floated past inside clear hydration harnesses, laughing as their grav rigs steered around a fountain. Mara kept to the edge of the walkway. She told herself it was because people walked too slowly. That was a lie. She liked having a wall to one side. She liked seeing exits. She liked knowing no one could come up behind her. At orientation, a cheerful Vayari counselor named Pel Saro asked returning veterans to raise a hand so the Institute could explain available support services. 9 hands went up in a room of 400. Mara S. did not. She sat in the 4th row and picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. There were things she had become good at during the war, sleeping in 90-minute pieces, repairing field relays in sleet, identifying artillery by sound, knowing when someone was lying because they were afraid and when they were lying because they planned to hurt you. Asking for help had never made the list. Her first class was Applied Load Systems, a second-year engineering course she had technically passed before deployment. Meridian had allowed her to retake it without penalty. Professor Oren Ilian was an Orinth, tall and narrow-shouldered, with bluish skin and 4 delicate fingers on each hand. He wore old-fashioned spectacles, even though his eyesight could have been corrected in 5 minutes at any clinic on station. Mara liked him immediately for that. It suggested he had his own stubbornness. He wrote his name on the board by hand. Machines, he told the class, are excellent at calculating what will happen when a structure fails. Engineers are paid to make sure it never gets the chance. Mara sat by the window. She took notes with a mechanical pencil. That became her small ritual. Everyone else used light screens or retinal overlays. Mara used paper. She liked the scratch of graphite. She liked erasing mistakes. She liked that paper did not glow in the dark. A student named Tio Rusk noticed on the 2nd day. Tio was human, maybe 20, with copper hair that never stayed flat and a habit of whispering sarcastic commentary at the worst possible moments. He leaned over before class and stared at Mara's notebook. "Is that archival technology?" Mara looked at him. "A pencil. I've seen them in museums. You want to borrow it?" "No, I don't think I'm licensed." She almost smiled. That irritated her. She had not come to Meridian to make friends. She had come because the veteran transition counselor on Luna had asked what she wanted before the war, and Mara had realized she could not remember the answer without looking it up. Engineering. Bridges, habitats, orbital frames. Things people built so other people could live. So she returned. The problem was that Meridian remembered who she had been. Her old academic file was still there, so were archived club photos. In one, she stood with 6 other engineering students on a maintenance platform, all of them soaked from a coolant leak and laughing. 2 of those students were dead. One had moved to Mars and never answered messages. One had become a military pilot and remained missing. The girl in the photograph looked like a relative Mara had once known. For the first week, she avoided the old places. Then the campus started forcing them on her. The cafeteria still sold lemon noodles from the same vendor. The South Library still smelled faintly of dust despite having almost no paper books. The lift near the fabrication lab still made a soft bump between levels 14 and 15. Her body remembered before she did. One afternoon the bump came, and Mara suddenly pictured her old friend Selly jumping inside the lift to make it shake harder. The memory was so ordinary that Mara had to step out 3 floors early. She stood in an empty corridor with one hand over her mouth until she could breathe again. No explosions. No blood. Just Selly laughing. That was what hurt. Meridian's administration had converted one of the old residence halls into veteran housing. Mara refused it and rented a narrow room above a bakery in the station's lower ring. She told the housing office she wanted distance from campus. The truth was simpler. She did not want to live in a building full of people who understood why she checked windows before sleeping. Understanding could feel too much like being watched. Her room had one bed, a small table, a shower cubicle, and a round window facing the stations in her transit spine. Every 20 minutes, a mag-tram passed silently through the transparent tube beyond the glass. She slept badly. When she woke from dreams, she made tea. When tea did not work, she repaired things. By the end of her second week, she had fixed the bakery owner's mixer, adjusted the window seals, rebuilt a broken kettle, and taken apart her desk lamp twice despite the fact that nothing was wrong with it. The bakery owner, an elderly Callan woman named Nessa, eventually handed Mara a faulty temperature sensor and said, "Here, you look restless." Mara stared at the device. "Is that a diagnosis?" "It is a request for free labor." Mara laughed. A real laugh this time. It startled both of them. That evening, Nessa left a warm pastry outside Mara's door without mentioning it. Things might have continued like that, slow, awkward, almost normal, if not for the boy in Professor Ilian's history elective. His name was Sen Arak. He was Karth. The Karth were difficult for humans to read at first. Their faces were narrow, their skin patterned with faint natural ridges, and their eyes reflected light in a way that made their expressions seem still even when they were not. During the war, Terran soldiers had invented cruel jokes about those eyes. Mara had laughed at some of them. That memory embarrassed her now. Sensat too rose ahead. The first time Mara saw the back of his neck, she recognized a pale circular mark near his collar. A military identification burn. Karth troops had carried them beneath the skin. Officers used different patterns from enlisted soldiers. Sen's mark was not military. It was a detention mark. Mara knew because she had seen hundreds of them at Rill Camp after liberation. She spent the entire lecture staring at the mark instead of listening. At the end of class, Sen closed his tablet and stood. Mara said, "Rill." He froze. Not dramatically. Just a small stop. A breath held too long. Then he turned. Up close he looked younger than she expected. 19 perhaps, maybe 22. War had made ages unreliable. "I'm sorry," he said. Mara pointed toward the mark, without lifting her hand very high. "That camp." His expression changed. Not fear. Calculation. "Were you there?" he asked. "After." He studied her face. Mara knew what he was doing, searching for unit patches that were no longer there, guessing from the scar, the posture, the way she kept her right side angled toward open space. Finally he said, "Then you saw what was left." Mara swallowed. "Yes." Sen nodded once. "He left." That should have been the end of it. It was not. 3 days later, Mara found him sitting alone outside the engineering fabrication hall, holding a broken recorder. The device was old, no bigger than 2 fingers, with a cracked casing and a manual data spool. He turned it over in his hands. Mara walked past, then stopped. She hated herself a little for stopping. "What happened?" Sen looked up. "It stopped reading." "Battery." "No." "May I?" He hesitated before giving it to her. Mara sat on the bench beside him. She took a tiny driver from the repair kit she carried in her bag. Tio had mocked her for carrying that too. She opened the casing. Inside, one contact had corroded. This was exposed to salt water. Sen looked toward the floor. "A long time ago." Mara cleaned the contact with a strip from her kit. "What's on it?" He did not answer. She regretted asking. Then Sen said, "My sister." Mara's hands paused. He continued quietly, her voice before real. The corridor seemed to grow too bright. Mara reassembled the recorder and pressed the switch. Static whispered. Then a girl's voice spoke in Karth. Mara understood only a few words. Home, mother, hurry, something about soup. The ordinariness of it hit her harder than any battlefield recording could have. Sen closed his eyes. The message lasted 12 seconds. When it ended, he did not thank Mara right away. He just held the recorder between both hands. Mara looked down the corridor and pretended not to notice that he was crying. After a while he said, "You fought us." "Yes." "Did you hate us?" Mara considered lying. "I hated whoever was shooting at me." "That is not the same question." "No." She rubbed graphite from the side of her thumb. "Some days I did." Sen nodded. "Do you now?" Mara looked at the recorder. "No." He stared at her for another second, as though deciding whether that answer deserved belief. Then he said, "Good, I have enough problems with my grades." It was a terrible joke. Mara laughed anyway. That was how they became friends. Not quickly. Sen never talked much about the camp. Mara never talked much about combat. They met for coffee after class. He was studying political law because he wanted to work on reconstruction tribunals. Mara told him that sounded miserable. He said engineering sounded like spending your life arguing with gravity. "Gravity usually listens to evidence," she replied. Tio joined them by accident one afternoon and never really left. By the fourth week, the three of them had a routine. Professor Ilian's lecture, lunch on the Western Terrace, 2 hours in the fabrication lab. Then Sen went to legal studies, Tio disappeared into some student club, and Mara walked the long way home to avoid the crowded tram interchange. Normal life did not arrive like sunlight. It came in small pieces. A joke she understood too late. A homework deadline that actually worried her. A stain on her sleeve from machine oil. A morning when she realized she had slept 6 straight hours. Then on a cold Thursday in late autumn, Mara noticed the guard. He stood near the west gate wearing station security black. Nothing unusual about that. Meridian had security everywhere. But this guard was watching Sen. Mara saw it because soldiers watched differently from civilians. A civilian looked at a person. A soldier looked at routes. Distance. Hands. Obstacles. The guard watched Sen leave the law building, then glanced toward the nearest lift, the stairwell, and the open promenade. Mara slowed. The guard noticed her noticing. He smiled. Mara kept walking. That evening, she wrote the time in the margin of her notebook. 1742, West Gate, tall gray eyes, station security, watching essay. She almost tore the page out. Instead, she closed the notebook. The next day, the same guard was outside the cafeteria. On Monday, Mara saw him near the library. On Tuesday, a different officer stood by the fabrication hall. Sen did not appear to notice. Mara said nothing. She had promised herself that school would be school. She was not on patrol. She was not responsible for anyone. She was not a sergeant anymore. That last sentence mattered. Sergeant Mara Venn had spent 3 years making decisions that determined whether other people reached morning. Student Mara Venn had a structural dynamics exam on Friday. She preferred the second life. But on Wednesday, as they sat on the Western Terrace, Sen suddenly asked, "Have you seen the security officers following me?" Mara put down her tea. Tio stopped chewing. "You noticed," Mara said. Sen gave her a flat look. "You are not subtle when you are pretending not to notice something." Tio looked between them. "Wait, following you." Sen's fingers tightened around his cup. I received a message last week. What kind? Mara asked. A legal message. That means nothing. It means I do not want to talk about it here. Mara scanned the terrace automatically. Students, service drones, 2 faculty members, a maintenance worker, a woman pushing a cart of hydroponic flowers. No visible security. Sen said quietly, the Reconstruction Tribunal requested my testimony. Tio blinked. About real? Sen nodded. Mara felt something cold settle inside her stomach. What did you see? Sen looked at her. Enough. She waited. He looked away towards Seleni's blue curve beneath the station. My father worked in logistics for the Dominion Army, not because he believed in them, because logistics workers received food allocations. When the retreat began, an officer named General Vale ordered certain camps cleared. Mara knew that name. Everyone who had served near Rill knew it. General Aura's Vale had disappeared during the final weeks of the war. Some said he died. Others said he escaped into the treaty systems under a false identity. Sen continued. My father copied the orders. He thought proof might protect us. It did not. Do you still have the copies? Mara asked. Sen's gaze shifted to her. No. The answer came too fast. Mara leaned back. Tio whispered, you absolutely have the copies. Sen sighed. I have something. What? Records, voice authorizations, transport manifests, names. Mara's hand had begun trembling beneath the table. She pressed it against her knee. Who knows? The tribunal. Who else? Sen hesitated. Someone who sent me a message telling me not to testify. Tio's face went pale. Mara looked toward the nearest exit. School, she reminded herself. This was school. Students were laughing 10 meters away. A cleaning drone bumped into a planter and chirped an apology. Somewhere below them, a tram passed through the station's spine. Mara said, show me the message. Sen opened his wrist screen. The message contained 8 words. Rill is finished. Let the dead remain dead. No sender identification. No routing trail. Mara read it twice. When did you tell campus security? I didn't. Why? Sen looked at her like she had asked why he did not hand his throat to a stranger. Because the officer who first contacted me about the tribunal was murdered 2 days later. Tio stopped breathing for a moment. Mara felt the old part of herself wake up. She hated how familiar it felt. Not excitement. Never that. Something colder. A narrowing of the world. Useful facts moving forward, noise moving away. Where are the records? She asked. Sen's jaw tightened. Mara, if people are following you, I need to know what they want. I did not ask you to protect me. No. Her voice was sharper than she intended. A few students looked over. Mara lowered it. No, you didn't. Sen's expression softened slightly. That is why I told you. You should have the choice to walk away. Mara stared at him. In the war, soldiers rarely got choices clean enough to recognize. This one sat between them on a cafeteria table. Tio said, I vote we tell someone responsible. Mara and Sen both looked at him. He raised his hands. I am aware that neither of you considers that a serious proposal. Mara rubbed her thumb along the edge of her notebook. Finally she said, we tell Professor Ilian. Sen frowned. Why him? Because he has spent 40 years at this school, hates administration, and wears glasses he doesn't need. That is the profile of a man who keeps records. Tio nodded slowly. Surprisingly convincing. They found Ilian in the structural lab, arguing with a projection model. He listened without interruption. When Sen finished, the professor removed his spectacles and cleaned them with a cloth. That worried Mara. People often performed small, careful actions when they needed time to control fear. Ilian put his glasses back on. "There is something you should know," he said. Mara leaned forward. "Meridian received a sealed security directive yesterday. We were instructed to provide station authorities with Sen's course schedule." Sen went still. "Did you?" "I refused." Tio exhaled. Ilian continued. "The rector did not." The room became very quiet. Mara said, "Who issued the directive?" "Galactic Security Command." "That's too high-level for a student witness." "I agree." Sen stood abruptly. "I need to leave." Mara stood too. "Not alone." His eyes flashed. "I said I did not ask." "I know what you said." For a second, they faced each other like opponents. Then Professor Ilian said softly, "Sen, sometimes accepting help is not the same as surrendering control." Sen's shoulders lowered. Mara pretended she had not needed to hear that too. They left through the south lab exit instead of the public corridor. Mara chose the route automatically. Tio noticed. "You know every service passage." "I worked maintenance my first year." "You never mentioned that." "You never asked." "Did maintenance teach you to check reflections in windows?" Mara looked at him. Tio stopped smiling. They crossed an enclosed sky bridge between the engineering tower and the old science wing. Below them, hundreds of lights flickered across Caro Station. Beyond the station glass, Selene filled half the sky, blue and white and peaceful. Sen walked between them. Halfway across, the lights went out. Not dimmed. Out. Emergency strips flashed red along the floor. Mara moved before she thought. She grabbed Sen's coat and pulled him against the wall. Tio said, "What?" "Down." A sound hissed through the dark. Something struck the glass where Sen's head had been. The impact made a sharp white star in the transparent alloy. Tio dropped. Mara smelled ionized air. Suppressed plasma. Someone had fired at them. A second shot struck the wall. Mara pushed Sen toward a maintenance alcove. "Move." He stumbled. Tio crawled behind them. The shooter fired again. Mara saw the brief blue reflection in the glass, upper catwalk, north end. She counted distance. 30 meters. Maybe 35. No weapon. No armor. 3 civilians. Her brain hated the arithmetic. She ripped the emergency extinguisher from the wall and threw it down the bridge. The cylinder clanged loudly. The next shot hit it. Mara moved in the opposite direction. Now. They sprinted. The emergency door at the south end opened after half a second that felt like a year. They fell through. Mara slammed the manual lock. Something hit the other side. Tio stared at her. "You threw an extinguisher at a sniper." "I threw it away from us." "That distinction is not helping." Sen was breathing too fast. Mara grabbed his shoulders. "Look at me." His eyes found hers. "Are you hit?" "No." "Tio, I think my dignity was wounded." "Good. Good. You can live without it." Footsteps sounded beyond the door. Mara pulled them toward the service stairs. They reached the lower level just as alarms began screaming through the building. Students poured into corridors. Security announcements ordered everyone to remain calm. Mara almost laughed at that. Remain calm was what people said when they had lost control. At the base of the stairs, 3 campus security officers appeared. One was the gray-eyed guard Mara had seen watching Sen. He raised both hands. "Student Ven, stop." Mara stopped. Sen stood behind her. The officer's nameplate read DARK Sol. Up close, Mara could see that he was not station-born. His boots carried red dust in the seams. Karth border colonies had red soil. "Someone fired on us," Mara said. "We know." "How?" "The weapon triggered structural sensors." "Then why are you looking at us instead of the shooter?" Sol's jaw tightened. "Because we need Mr. Arak in protective custody." Sen whispered no. Sol looked at him. "You are in danger." "I am aware." "You need to come with us." Myra studied the other two guards. Their uniforms were correct. Their weapons were not. Campus security carried low-energy restraint pistols. These officers had military sidearms in civilian holsters. Mara said, "Who authorized protective custody?" Sol's hand moved slightly toward his coat. The same motion she had noticed days earlier. "Galactic Security Command." Mara heard Tio breathe behind her. She said, "Show me the order." Sol's expression hardened. "That is not your concern." Mara gave him a tired smile. "It became my concern when somebody shot at my study group." "Step aside." "No." The corridor filled with distant alarms. Students were being moved into shelter rooms, doors sealed one by one. Sol stared at Mara. Then something strange happened. His gaze dropped to her left hand. The tremor had returned. Mara saw him recognize it. He knew veterans. Maybe he was one. His voice changed. "Quieter." "You are discharged, Sergeant." Mara felt the word like a slap. Tio looked at her. Sen did not. He already knew. Sol continued, "Whatever you think you are doing, you are not in uniform anymore." "I know." "Then act like it." Mara's heart was hammering. She wanted desperately to obey. Not him. The idea. "You are not in uniform anymore." She had repeated that sentence in her room at night. She had written it once across an entire notebook page. She wanted to be a student. She wanted to care about exams. She wanted to complain about cafeteria food and forget which sound meant incoming fire. But Sen stood behind her, and the officer in front of her was carrying a military pistol he had no reason to carry. Mara said, "If you have a legitimate order, show it." Sol's face became unreadable. Then a new voice came from behind the officers. "Stand down." Professor Ilian walked into the corridor. He looked almost absurd among armed guards, thin and elderly, spectacles slipping down his nose. But beside him was Rector Haven, the administrator who ran Meridian Institute. And with them came 6 uniformed campus marshals. Real campus marshals. Their restraint weapons were visible. Sol's officers shifted. Ilian noticed too. The professor said, "Officer Sol, your authority on academic grounds has been suspended pending verification of the directive you presented." Sol's mouth tightened. Rector Haven added, "Surrender your weapons." For 1 second, nobody moved. Mara knew that second. It existed before every bad decision. Sol looked at Sen. Then at Mara. His hand began to rise. Mara stepped forward. Not toward his weapon. Toward him. Close enough that firing would become difficult without hitting his own people. She kept her hands visible. "Don't," she said. Sol froze. Mara could see sweat near his hairline. He was scared. That surprised her. A scared man with a weapon was worse than an angry one. "Whatever they told you," Mara said quietly, "you do not have to make it permanent." His eyes met hers. Something passed there. Recognition, maybe. Not friendship. The terrible familiarity of two people who had both stood in places where one movement could ruin a life. Saul slowly removed his pistol. He set it on the floor. The other officers followed. The marshals moved in. Tio exhaled so loudly that Rector Haven looked at him. "I have anxiety," Tio said. "No one asked," Mara muttered. "That has never stopped me." For a few minutes, it seemed the danger had passed. It had not. The weapon recovered from Saul carried a Dominion military serial number. The two officers with him were not listed in station security personnel records. By midnight, they had disappeared from custody. Not escaped. Disappeared. Camera records vanished for 11 minutes. Door logs reset. A detention room opened without an access trace. Saul remained behind because he had been separated for questioning. When Mara learned this, she was sitting in a temporary security office with Sen and Professor Ilian. Tio had been sent home after promising 5 times not to post anything online. Mara did not believe him. Saul sat across the room with his wrists restrained. He looked exhausted. A marshal asked him where the fake officers had gone. "I don't know." "Who are they?" "I don't know." "Why were you working with them?" Saul closed his eyes. "Because they had command authorization." "From whom?" Mara asked. The marshal glared at her. She ignored him. Saul looked at Mara. "General Security Director Varro." Professor Ilian frowned. "Varro is responsible for Treaty World counterintelligence." Saul nodded. Sen's face changed. Mara saw it. "What?" she asked. Sen stared at Saul. "My father's records mention that name." The room went silent. Saul looked confused. Then afraid. "What records?" Sen did not answer. Mara stood. The marshal said, "Sit down." Mara turned to him. "You have a compromised detention system, missing armed suspects, and a security director whose name appears in evidence connected to war crimes. I think sitting is no longer the central problem." Professor Ilian rubbed his forehead. "I dislike agreeing with students this often." Mara looked at Sen. "Where are the records?" He hesitated, then reached inside his coat and removed the repaired recorder. Mara stared. "The message from your sister." "Not only that." He turned the recorder over and pressed 2 recessed contacts. The casing split open. Inside was a second memory filament. Sen said, "My father hid the archive beneath her recording. He thought no one would destroy the last thing I had of her." Mara felt a painful pressure behind her ribs. Clever. Desperate. Human though Sen was not. The marshal reached for the device. Sen pulled it back. "No. You need to surrender evidence." "To whom?" he asked. "Your system just released 2 men who tried to abduct me." The marshal's hand stopped. Nobody had a good answer. Saul whispered, "You cannot keep that here." Mara turned. He was staring at the recorder like it was an explosive. "What do you know?" Saul swallowed. "I know Director Varro ordered us to bring Sen to Dock 12 if there was any sign he intended to testify. And then I was told a tribunal transport would collect him." "Did you believe that?" Saul looked down. "At first." Mara understood. "And after I saw the 2 men assigned to help me." "The fake officers?" "Yes." "Who were they?" Saul took a slow breath. "Former Dominion Special Security." Sen backed into the wall. Professor Ilian removed his glasses. Mara felt the world narrow again. "Why didn't you stop?" she asked. Saul's voice cracked slightly. "Because my daughter lives on Kira Station." No one spoke. He continued, "They sent me a photograph of her leaving school." Mara looked away. There it was. The war again. Not uniforms, not flags. Fear moving from one person to another, until nobody remembered who had started it. The marshal cursed under his breath. Professor Ilian said, "We contact the tribunal directly, no intermediaries." Sen shook his head. "Varro controls treaty counterintelligence. He will see the transmission. Then we use civilian channels." "Too slow," Mara said. Everyone looked at her. She hated that they did. She hated that part of herself already had a plan. Sen asked, "What are you thinking?" Mara looked through the office window at the dark campus beyond. Emergency lights still glowed along the walkways. Students clustered behind residents' windows. Security drones moved in slow patrol circles above the courtyards. Somewhere out there were at least 2 trained Dominion operatives. Possibly more. She said, "I'm thinking they know Sen has the records." "Yes." "They know the campus is compromised." "Yes." "They also know tonight failed." Professor Ilian's expression sharpened. "So they will try again." Mara nodded. The professor looked toward the recorder. "Then we move the evidence." "No," Mara said. Sen frowned. Mara continued, "We move Sen." "To where?" Mara thought of a place nobody, on-campus security, would expect. A place beneath the lower ring, warm and smelling of yeast and burnt sugar. Nessa's bakery. Professor Ilian blinked. The bakery. It has independent power, old mechanical locks, and no campus network connection. Saul stared at her. "You assessed the security of your bakery." Mara shrugged. "I get bored." For the first time all night, Sen smiled. It lasted less than a second. They left through a maintenance tunnel at 02:13. Mara wrote the time down later. She did that when she was afraid things might become unreal. Times helped. Facts helped. 02:13 left engineering sublevel. 02:31 reached transit spine. 02:46 bakery service entrance. Nessa opened the door holding a bread knife. Mara looked at it. Nessa said, "You are not the only one who gets restless." Sen nearly laughed. They explained only enough. Nessa did not ask many questions. She locked the front shutters, turned off the public sign, and led them downstairs to an old flour storage room built before station construction codes required network doors. "You can stay until morning," she said. Mara shook her head. "Morning is the problem." Nessa studied her face. "You look different." Mara knew what she meant. Her shoulders had changed, her voice, her eyes. Sergeant Venn had returned without permission. Mara looked away. "I'm fine." Nessa snorted. People who are fine rarely arrive before dawn with a frightened Karth student and a professor in bedroom slippers. Professor Ilian looked down. "I left quickly." Nessa handed him tea. By sunrise they had a plan. Professor Ilian knew a retired tribunal judge on Selene. The judge had no connection to Galactic Security Command and could authenticate the records independently. A civilian ferry departed Caro Station at 09:40. If Sen reached the ferry, the evidence could leave the station physically rather than through monitored networks. Simple. That was why Mara disliked it. Simple plans had many places to break. At 08:05 Tio arrived at the bakery. Mara stared at him through the half-open service door. "What are you doing here?" "You told me to go home." Yes, I did. And then I came here. How did you know where? Tio held up his tablet. You logged into the bakery network last week to help me with a project. Your device still lists it as trusted. Mara closed her eyes. I have survived artillery barrages and lost to a 19-year-old with network history. I'm 20. That makes it worse. He stepped inside carrying a backpack. I brought breakfast. Nessa looked offended. I own a bakery. Tio slowly lowered the bag. Right. For 10 minutes, they almost felt like students again. They ate bread at a metal preparation table. Professor Ilian complained about the quality of Tio's purchased coffee. Sen repaired a loose strap on his bag. Mara watched steam rise from her cup. Then the bakery lights flickered. Once. Twice. Off. Nessa whispered, that is not normal. Mara stood. The emergency battery lights came on. Outside, the station went silent. No tram hum. No ventilation rumble. No distant voices from the street. A second later, every communicator in the room displayed the same emergency notice. Meridian District under security lockdown. Remain in place. Await galactic security personnel. Mara read the words. Then she looked at Saul, who had been released into Professor Ilian's custody after agreeing to testify about the false directive. His face had gone pale. That wording, he said. What? Mara asked. That is military containment language. Professor Ilian frowned. This is a school district. Saul looked toward the ceiling, as if he could see through 30 levels of station metal. No, he said. His voice was barely audible. It isn't anymore. On the table, Mara's tea had gone cold. She drank it anyway. During the war, warm drinks had been a luxury. After the war, wasting one felt strangely disrespectful. Tio watched her finish it and made a face. That is cold. Yes. You could make another. Yes. Then why are you drinking it? Mara looked into the empty cup. Because I made this one. Tio opened his mouth, thought better of whatever joke had arrived, and nodded. It was a tiny exchange, almost meaningless. Yet Mara remembered it later because it explained something she had not known how to say. She had come home believing life could be restarted like a machine. Shut down the damaged system, replace the broken parts, power it back on. But people were not machines. You did not get a clean restart. You finished some things cold. You carried scratches forward. You learned which damaged pieces still worked. Then, if you were lucky, somebody sat beside you while you figured out what came next. A deep mechanical vibration passed through the floor. Mara knew that sound too. Docking clamps. Heavy ones. A warship had just attached to Caro Station. Tio stared at her. Tell me that's a cargo carrier. Mara did not answer. Another vibration came. Then another. Multiple ships. Sen clutched the recorder inside his coat. Nessa's hand tightened around her bread knife. Professor Ilian whispered, who sends soldiers to a university. Mara looked toward the locked door. Somewhere above them, boots began striking metal walkways in disciplined rhythm. Not police boots. Military. She had spent years trying to forget that rhythm. Now it was coming down the station toward her classroom. Mara opened her notebook to a clean page. Her hand shook once, then stopped. She wrote the time. 08:17. Under it she wrote one sentence. They came to the school. And beneath that, after a moment, another. This time, I know what I'm protecting. Before the first armored boots reached the lower ring, there was a stretch of 12 minutes that Mara remembered later with almost painful clarity. Nothing moved outside the bakery. The emergency notice stayed frozen on every screen. The ovens had shut down with the grid, leaving the room to cool slowly around them. Yeast, coffee, and the metallic smell of the backup batteries mixed in the air. Sen stood near the flower room door, one hand inside his coat. Myra knew he was touching the recorder. "Stop checking it," she said. "I am not checking it. You have touched that pocket 7 times. Sen looked offended. "You counted." "I count things when I am nervous." Tio, sitting on an overturned ingredient bin, lifted one finger. "That explains several unsettling details about you." Myra ignored him. Sen drew the recorder out anyway. In the weak emergency light, the little device looked absurdly harmless. Scratched plastic, a cracked corner, a strip of faded blue tape across the back. It had probably cost less than Mara's boots. And now several armed ships had attached themselves to a civilian station because of what was hidden inside it. "My sister hated this thing," Sen said. No one answered. She said the microphone made her voice sound too deep. He rubbed his thumb across the blue tape. She would record over messages 3 or 4 times, even when she was only telling me to come home for dinner. Mara leaned against the preparation table. "What was her name?" "Leia." The name was quiet in the room. "How old?" 16. Mara looked down. Sen kept talking, not because anyone had asked him to, but because sometimes a locked room loosened things a person had spent years holding shut. She wanted to study atmospheric chemistry. Our home world had these storms every warm season, purple clouds, almost black at the bottom. She collected rain in jars and wrote numbers on everything. My mother used to yell because the kitchen shelves were full of water samples. Tio smiled faintly. "She sounds like a scientist." "She was annoying." "That also sounds like a scientist," Professor Ilian said. Sen laughed through his nose, then his face tightened. "She died 3 days before your army reached Rill." Mara did not ask how. She had learned there were questions that served the curious and questions that served the grieving. They were not always the same. Sen looked at her anyway. "I used to imagine humans coming," he said. "Not because I knew anything about humans. We heard rumors. Terran Marines were landing on the outer colonies. Terran ships had broken the blockade. Terran medics were treating prisoners. Every rumor made you sound larger than life." Mara's mouth felt dry. "We were. I know that now." "Good." He studied her. "Does that disappoint you?" No. Mara thought of 19-year-olds vomiting inside troop transports, of officers who cried after writing casualty reports, of mechanics who slept beside broken engines because there was nowhere else warm. It scares me when people need soldiers to be heroes. Heroes do not get tired in the stories. They do not make stupid decisions because they have not slept. They do not miss. Sen looked toward the dark ceiling. "Did you miss?" Mara knew what he meant. "People." He nodded. "Yes." "People you meant to save." "Yes." Her voice came out flatter than she intended. She expected the old pressure in her chest. Instead, there was only fatigue. Maybe because she had said it plainly. Maybe because there was no room left for pretending. "My unit reached a housing block outside Rill after a bombardment," she said. "We heard tapping under the foundation. We had maybe 40 minutes before another strike window. I thought I knew where the sound was coming from. I ordered the cutting team to the east side. No one moved. I was wrong. The survivors were west. We found them after." "How many?" Sen asked. 4. "Were they alive?" 1. Nessa turned away and busied herself with a dead oven control panel. It was a kindness. Mara continued. "For a year I kept thinking that if I had been smarter, calmer, better trained, whatever, All 4 would have lived. Then a medic from my unit found me after discharge and said something I hated. What? She said I was trying to turn grief into a math problem, because math problems have answers. Professor Ilian watched her carefully. Mara gave a small shrug. She was rude. Tio said, was she right? Yes. The answer surprised Mara with how easily it came. Sen looked at the recorder again. My father thought records would save us. Records can still matter. They did not save Leia. No. Then why take this risk? Mara looked at him. Because saving the dead is not the only reason to tell the truth. Sen's eyes reflected the emergency light. What does that mean? It means somebody else is still alive. He did not answer. Mara stepped closer and tapped the recorder with one finger. If those names prove who ordered what happened at Rill, then somebody who would do it again might be stopped. Maybe not forever, maybe not cleanly, but enough for one family to get a different ending. Sen swallowed. That sounds like something a soldier would say. No, Mara looked around the dark bakery, at Tio, at Nessa, at Professor Ilian in his ridiculous slippers. A soldier would talk about objectives. I think I am finally learning to talk about people. The building shuddered as another docking clamp engaged. Dust drifted from an overhead vent. Sen slid the recorder back into his pocket. This time he did not touch it again. A moment later, the first amplified command echoed faintly from the street above. All residents remain indoors. Galactic Security Emergency Protocol is now in effect. Saul closed his eyes. Mara looked at the door. The 12 quiet minutes were over. The first soldiers Mara saw were not Karth. That bothered her more than if they had been. Through the bakery's narrow delivery window, she watched a line of galactic security troops move along the lowering street in matte blue armor. They came in pairs, helmets sealed, rifles angled down but ready. Their shoulder patches carried the white spiral of the treaty authority. The same authority that had negotiated the armistice. The same authority whose officials had stood behind microphones and promised that civilian institutions would never again become tools of war. One of the soldiers stopped outside a flower shop and scanned the door with a portable identity reader. Another checked the alley. They were not searching randomly. They were clearing a route. Mara knew the difference. Behind her, Tio whispered, "Those are ours, right?" Saul answered before Mara could. "They are galactic security." That was not my question. Saul looked at the floor. No one spoke for a second. Nessa quietly pulled the delivery shutter closed. The bakery became a sealed metal box. Mara felt the air change immediately. Not physically. The backup ventilation still worked, but every person in the room became aware of the walls. Professor Ilian said, "Can they legally do this?" Saul gave him a tired look. Legality is easier to discuss before armored units arrive. I dislike that answer. So do I. Mara crouched beside a maintenance panel near the floor and removed its cover. Tio watched her. "What are you doing?" "Finding out if they cut local network lines or only the district relay." "You can do that." "I had hobbies before the war." "You keep describing felonies as hobbies." She pulled out an old diagnostic lead, then stopped asking questions. The bakery used a primitive building network. Primitive was suddenly useful. The system still talked through hard cable instead of station cloud relays. Mara found a live maintenance channel and connected her wrist screen. A map of the lower ring appeared. Most public feeds were dark, but traffic sensors were still active. So were environmental monitors. And door counters. Mara zoomed out. Small green dots marked movement across the district. There were too many. 48, she said. Saul stepped closer. What? Possible troops, maybe more. The sensors only count mass crossing certain corridors. Saul's face tightened. A standard security boarding platoon is 40. They brought at least one platoon to arrest one student, Tio asked. No, Mara said. She studied the map. They brought enough people to control the campus. Sen stood near the rear wall, quiet. Mara looked at him. You said the archive has names. Yes. How many? Hundreds. Current officials. Some. Treaty officials. Sen hesitated. Yes. Saul cursed softly. Professor Ilian took off his spectacles. Mara looked at him. You do that when you're scared. Ilian stopped cleaning them. I do it when they are dirty. They're never dirty. The professor put them back on. This is an inappropriate time for student observations. Despite everything, Tio smiled. Mara returned to the map. The troops were converging on 3 places: the transit interchange, the academic towers, and the central forum. They were sealing exits first. Then communications. Then gathering civilians. Textbook containment. She had done versions of it herself. That knowledge felt ugly in her hands. Sen said, they will search the district. Yes. How long until they reach us? Mara checked the movement sensors. 20 minutes if they are thorough. 10 if someone tells them where we are. Nessa folded her arms. No one here knows. Tio looked guilty. Mara turned slowly toward him. He held up both hands. I did not post the bakery. What did you post? Nothing useful. Tio. I said there was a security lockdown and people should avoid Meridian. From where? My student account. Using what connection? He looked at the cable in Mara's hand. Oh. Mara closed her eyes. Nessa muttered something in Callan that the translator refused to render. Professor Ilian said, I suspect that was uncomplimentary. It was accurate, Nessa replied. Mara checked the building network logs. Tio's outgoing message had been routed through the bakery node before the district relay went dark. If security had been watching student accounts, they had the location. 8 minutes, Mara said. Tio's face drained. I'm sorry. Mara grabbed her coat. Be sorry while moving. There was an old freight passage behind the bakery ovens. Nessa used it twice a week for flour deliveries. It connected to a maintenance corridor running beneath the commercial strip. The door was mechanical. No network record. Mara loved it instantly. Nessa unlocked it with an actual metal key. Tio stared. You own a key. Nessa pointed it at him. Say one more thing and I will own one fewer student. They moved into the passage. Mara went first. Not because she wanted to. Because nobody else did. The maintenance tunnel was shoulder-wide, lit every 10 meters by dim amber strips. Pipes ran overhead. Warm condensate dripped onto the floor. Somewhere beyond the walls, the station's mechanical systems rumbled like distant weather. Mara had spent enough time in tunnels during the war to dislike them deeply. She kept walking. Sen followed. Tio came next, then Professor Ilian, Nessa, and Saul. Mara stopped after 50 meters. Nessa, go back. The bakery owner stared at her. No. They are looking for us, not you. They will search my building. Yes. If I am missing, that looks suspicious. Mara had no answer. Nessa nodded once, satisfied. Good, we continue. Tio whispered, I want to be her when I'm old. Nessa did not turn around. At your current rate, that is ambitious. They reached a junction beneath the tram line. Mara opened her paper campus map. Tio stared again. You have a paper map too. I like things that still work when someone turns off the network. He nodded. I am becoming less judgmental. The civilian ferry dock was impossible now. Security troops controlled the transit spine. They needed another route to get the archive off station. Professor Ilian pointed at the map. The astronomy department has autonomous survey probes. Mara looked at him. They're unmanned. Yes. They can leave station control. Some can. Students run field projects around Seleni's moons. Sen understood first. Put the archive on a probe. Ilian nodded. Send it physically to the tribunal judge. Saul shook his head. Security will monitor launches. Official launches, Ilian said. Mara studied the old campus layout. The astronomy lab sat on the far side of Meridian, 6 levels above the central forum. Between them and it were several thousand students, locked buildings, and a military platoon. Tio looked at the route. That seems bad. Yes. Do you have a less bad option? No. Good, consistency is comforting. They moved. At 08:41, the first campus-wide announcement came through emergency speakers. By order of Galactic Security Command, Meridian Institute is under temporary protective control. Students and faculty must remain inside designated shelter areas. Any person attempting to leave controlled zones may be detained. Professor Ilian whispered, "Protective control." Mara heard the disgust in his voice. During the war, governments had invented many gentle phrases for frightening things. Protective relocation, temporary screening, security cleansing. She had learned to distrust adjectives. The tunnel ended beneath the old chemistry wing. Mara climbed a ladder and eased open a service hatch. A classroom stood empty above them. Rows of stools, lab tables, a half-finished molecular model floating above the instructor's desk. Mara climbed out. The room smelled faintly of solvent and citrus disinfectant. It was so ordinary she felt angry. War did not belong here. That thought surprised her. During deployment, she had believed war did not belong anywhere, but the belief had become abstract after enough months. Front lines existed, ships fought, buildings burned. You stopped asking whether it belonged. Now she looked at a forgotten lunch container beside a microscope and understood the obscenity more clearly. Someone had come to class yesterday, expecting to come back today. She motioned the others up. Saul climbed last. His restraints had been removed in the bakery. Mara had argued for it. The former guard noticed her looking at him. You still don't trust me? No. Then why free my hands? Because if shooting starts, I'd rather have 6 useful hands than 4. Saul almost smiled. That is not trust. No. What would trust look like? Mara checked the door window. I'll tell you if we survive long enough. The corridor outside was clear. They crossed into a faculty stairwell. 2 levels up, voices echoed. Mara raised a fist. Everyone stopped. Boots. 3, maybe 4 soldiers. Coming down. Mara opened the nearest door and pushed the group into a storage room. There was barely space. Shelves pressed against their shoulders. Cleaning compounds, spare lab equipment, boxes of disposable gloves. Nessa's elbow dug into Tio's ribs. He opened his mouth. She covered it with one hand. The soldiers passed outside. Mara listened. Their commander was speaking through a helmet channel, loud enough to leak into the corridor. Section 4 secure, still no visual on Arak. A voice crackled back. Continue sweep. Priority targets are Arak, Professor Oren Ilian, and former Terran Sergeant Mara Venn. Myra felt every eye in the closet turn toward her. The soldier continued down the stairs. Only when the sound disappeared did Nessa remove her hand from Tio's mouth. Tio whispered, "You're a priority target." "Yes. That feels like something we should discuss. It means they know I'm helping Sen." Saul shook his head. "It means more than that." Mara looked at him. He said, "Security Command has your service history. If you are listed specifically, they consider you operationally dangerous. I'm an engineering student. You were a boarding sergeant." Mara's face tightened. Professor Ilian looked at her. "You never said what you did." "I didn't think it belonged on my course registration." Tio whispered, "Boarding as in boarding ships." "Yes. With people shooting at you. Usually. And you left that out." Mara gave him a look. "You never told me you sing in the student theater." Tio looked offended. "That is private." Nessa made a quiet sound that might have been laughter. They waited another 30 seconds, then continued. The campus had changed. Every familiar hallway felt slightly wrong under lockdown lighting. Doors that normally stood open were sealed. Holographic signs flashed instructions. Security drones hovered at intersections. Mara avoided them, using maintenance passages she remembered from her first year. Once they crawled through a service conduit behind the old lecture hall. Professor Ilian complained continuously about his knees. "That is because you wore slippers," Mara whispered. "I did not plan a military occupation before breakfast." "Poor preparation. I will revise the syllabus." They reached the library at 0912. The astronomy tower was still 2 buildings away. The library should have been empty. It was not. More than 60 students had gathered behind the main stacks. A young librarian stood in front of them, trying to keep everyone quiet. When Mara entered through a staff passage, the librarian nearly screamed. Professor Ilian raised both hands. "Leary, it's us." The librarian, a small thin woman with silver facial markings, sagged against a shelf. "Professor, what is happening?" "An excellent question." She pointed toward the students. "Security ordered us to the Central Forum. Then 2 campus marshals told us not to go because armed units were detaining people there." Mara's stomach tightened. "Detaining who?" "Veterans, Karth students, anyone from legal studies." Sen closed his eyes. Mara looked over the group. Young faces. Some frightened, some angry. One student was quietly crying into another's shoulder. A human boy in a sports jacket recognized Mara. "You're the veteran from Ilian's class." Mara hated the way the word moved through the room. Veteran. People looked at her differently. Like she had become an answer. She wanted to tell them she was not. Instead she asked Leary, "Does the library have an emergency exit?" "Yes. East Archive stairs." "Where do they go?" "Central Forum, lower level." "Not good." Tio moved among the students, checking if anyone was hurt. He was scared. Mara could see it in the way he talked too quickly, but he talked anyway. That mattered. A Draxel student asked, "Are they going to shoot us?" Mara turned. The entire room waited. She could have lied. She did not. "I don't know." The student's face tightened. Mara continued, "But most soldiers do not want to shoot civilians, even when they are following bad orders, so we make it easy for them not to." "How?" someone asked. "Stay together. No sudden movements. No threats. Record everything if your devices work, and don't give them a reason to turn fear into panic." Sen watched her. Mara added, "If someone tells you being brave means acting fearless, ignore them. Fear is useful. It tells you to pay attention." That calmed the room more than reassurance would have. Professor Ilian moved beside her. We need to get these students somewhere secure. Mara looked at the map. The library's old archive vault had thick fire doors and independent ventilation. Not comfortable, but defensible against a sweep without appearing threatening. They began moving students downstairs. That decision changed everything. Mara's original plan had been to get Sen to the astronomy tower and send the archive away. Simple objective. Now she had 63 civilians. Then 81. Students emerged from side rooms and joined them. A maintenance crew arrived from the North Hall. 2 professors brought 11 first-years from a sealed classroom. By 0928, Mara had 106 people in the archive level. She stood in the doorway and realized the war had found the exact weakness she had spent years pretending she did not have. She could not walk away from people who were scared. Saul stood beside her. You should leave them. Mara looked at him sharply. For their safety, he said, they are not targets, you are. He was right. That made her angrier. Sen approached. He is right. Not helping. You and I go. Ilian can take the students. Mara stared through the archive doors at the crowd. A girl was helping an amphibious student refill his hydration pack from emergency water. Tio was showing 3 first-years how to disable their location broadcasts. Nessa had somehow found a box of library tea and was distributing cups. Professor Ilian was arguing with a security announcement, projected on the wall as though the recording could hear him. Mara felt something in her chest loosen. They were not helpless. That was another habit the war had given her, the belief that protection meant doing everything yourself. It did not. Sometimes protection meant trusting people to carry their part. Mara nodded. We leave. Tio heard her. I'm coming. No. Yes. You are not trained. Neither is Sen. That is not an argument. It is from where I'm standing. Mara stepped closer, Tio. His face changed. For once, no joke. If this is about the message from the bakery, he said, I know I made it worse, but that's not why I'm coming. You two keep doing this thing where you decide everybody else is safer if you carry the dangerous part alone. Mara said nothing. He continued, I'm good with systems. The astronomy lab is mostly systems. If you reach a probe and can't launch it, what then? I figure it out. Exactly, you figure everything out alone. His voice shook. I am scared, Mara. I would very much like to remain here and hide behind a shelf, but Sen is my friend too. Mara looked at him for a long moment. Then she handed him her spare diagnostic lead. Stay behind me. Tio swallowed. Gladly. Nessa refused to come. Not because Mara asked her to stay. Because she had already chosen. These students need someone who knows how to feed a crowd, she said. Professor Ilian looked at the emergency ration cabinet. The library has supplies. Nessa inspected the label on one packet and looked insulted. That is not food. Mara hugged her. The action surprised both of them. Nessa's body went still. Then her arms closed around Mara. Come back, she said. Mara nodded. She did not promise. Soldiers learned not to promise things they could not control. They left through the archive stairwell. Mara, Sen, Tio, Saul, and Professor Ilian. Ilian had insisted on coming because the astronomy department would trust him. Mara had pointed out that he was 72. He had pointed out that she had failed his first quiz. Apparently, that settled the matter. The central forum lay 1 level below. They avoided it at first. Then gunfire changed the route. 3 short bursts echoed from the North Passage. Mara stopped. Students screamed somewhere beyond the wall. She moved toward the sound. Saul grabbed her arm. The tower is the other way. I know. Sen is the objective. Mara looked at him. Saul released her immediately. That sentence sounded better in my head. Good. They ran north. The corridor opened onto the central forum balcony. Below, hundreds of students had been gathered in rows beneath the glass dome. Galactic security troops surrounded them. At the far end, 2 students lay on the floor. One moved. One did not. Mara's vision sharpened. A security officer stood over them shouting commands. A young human student was on his knees, with his hands behind his head. Blood ran from his forehead. Another troop kicked a discarded data pad away. Tia whispered, "What happened?" Saul scanned the positions. Someone resisted. Mara's jaw tightened. Then she saw the officer in command. His armor carried no name. But the man beside him did. Director Varro, Galactic Security's Treaty Counterintelligence Chief, stood inside a university forum, while armed soldiers held students at rifle point. He was older than Mara expected, human perhaps 55, silver hair, clean uniform, no helmet. That bothered her too. A man without a helmet in a dangerous place either believed himself safe or wanted everyone to see his face. Varro lifted a portable speaker. Sen Arak is wanted for questioning regarding stolen military intelligence. Anyone assisting him will be treated as an accessory to espionage. The students murmured. Sen flinched beside Mara. Tio whispered, "He turned you into a spy." Sen's voice was bitter, efficient. Varro continued, "Former Sergeant Mara Ven is believed to be armed and dangerous." Mara looked down at her empty hands. Professor Ilian muttered, "Government communications remain admirably factual." The director held up an image of Mara from her military file. Longer hair, combat uniform, younger face. Mara felt exposed in a way gunfire had never managed. Students below began looking around. Varro said, "Do not approach her." Saul leaned toward Mara. "Now everyone is a censor." She nodded. They backed away from the balcony. Then someone below shouted, "There!" Mara froze. A student was pointing upward. Not at her. At Saul. But the soldiers followed the gesture. One saw Sen. "Target!" Mara grabbed Sen and pushed him behind a support column. The first shot hit the railing. Students below screamed and scattered. Chaos exploded across the forum. "Go!" Mara shouted. They ran. Security troops moved toward the stairs. Mara counted their footfalls. At least 6. The astronomy tower route was gone. She turned into the old humanities wing. Tio nearly slipped on the polished floor. Professor Ilian was breathing hard. Mara slowed just enough to keep him with them. Saul said, "Leave me." "No. I can delay them." "No. Mara. You have a daughter waiting for you." Saul looked at her. "Then stop trying to spend your life because you feel guilty." The words hit him hard. Mara knew because they hit her too. They reached a lecture hall. Mara locked the door behind them. The hall had 2 exits, tiered seating, a projection pit, and an old maintenance hatch behind the instructor platform. She knew because she had once slept through a philosophy lecture there. School knowledge, not battlefield knowledge. She pointed, "Hatch." Tio pulled it open. Too small for Ilian. Mara cursed. Footsteps approached. Saul looked at the second door. "We split." "No." We have to. Professor Ilian leaned against a desk, breathing hard. For once, Officer Saul is correct. Mara hated everyone. Sen shoved the recorder into Mara's hand. She stared at it. No. You take it. They want you. They want this. Mara, Tio said. The footsteps were closer. Professor Ilian straightened. I will go with Saul through the main corridor. They know I am associated with Sen. We draw them east. Mara shook her head. Absolutely not. I have tenure. That is not armor. It has survived several administrations. Even now, Tio laughed once. Ilian gripped Mara's shoulder. His 4 fingers were surprisingly strong. You came back here to be a student, he said. Allow your professor to do something foolish for you. Mara stared at him. She wanted to argue. There was no time. The door shook under an impact. Saul moved beside Ilian. I know a route to the East Labs. Mara handed him her paper map. Saul looked at it. You're giving me the map. I'm trusting you. For the first time since they met, he looked genuinely surprised. Then he folded the map carefully and put it inside his coat. I'll return it. That would be nice. The door shook again. Mara pulled Ilian into a quick embrace. The professor patted her back awkwardly. You are still failing structural dynamics. I know. Good perspective. Then he and Saul ran through the second exit. Mara pushed Sen and Tio into the maintenance hatch. She followed. Behind them, the lecture hall door burst open. The conduit was dark. They crawled. Voices echoed through the wall. Clear the room. Second exit open. Movement east. They're following them, Tio whispered. Mara kept crawling. The conduit climbed toward the astronomy building. 10 meters. 20. 30. Her knees hurt. Her scar pulled under her jaw. The recorder pressed against her ribs inside her coat. Sen crawled ahead. Tio behind. Then the entire conduit shook. A deep explosion rolled through the structure. Emergency lights flashed. Dust filled the passage. Tio coughed. What was that? Mara listened. Not a weapon impact. Something larger. Docking level. A station announcement screamed through the conduit speakers. Warning, unauthorized vessel approach. Defense grid active. Sen looked back. More ships. Mara's wrist screen flickered alive for half a second as external communications surged through the emergency network. One message appeared. Unknown sender. 3 words. We heard you. Then the screen went dark again. Mara stared at it. Tio whispered, who heard us? The answer came as a second impact shook the station. This one was followed by a sound Mara had not heard in 4 years. A Terran military emergency tone. 3 low notes. Pause. 3 low notes. The old fleet identification signal. Mara's heart stopped for a beat. Sen looked at her. What is that? She knew the signal. Every Terran veteran knew it. It meant a human military vessel had entered contested space and was broadcasting under rescue authority. Tio's face changed. Mara. She swallowed. Humans. Above them, the station speakers crackled. A woman's voice came through, distorted by interference. This is Terran hospital ship Mercy Bell to Cairo Station. We received an emergency civilian distress packet originating from Meridian Institute. Galactic security forces will cease armed operations inside the academic district and permit medical access. Silence. Then Director Varro's voice answered over the same channel. Mercy Bell, You have entered a lawful security operation. Withdraw immediately." The woman replied, "No. One word. Come." Almost bored, Mara felt a laugh rise in her throat. She did not know the officer speaking, but the tone was painfully human. Varro said, "This matter concerns classified intelligence. It concerns injured students. You do not have jurisdiction. I have 6 operating theaters, 40 trauma beds, and visual confirmation of weapons fire inside a civilian university. I have enough jurisdiction for today." Tia whispered, "I like her." Mara did too. The voice continued, "Meridian students, if you can hear this, activate any local emergency beacon. Do not approach armed personnel. Medical teams are preparing entry." The transmission cut. Sen looked at Mara. "Did you call them?" "No." Tio slowly raised a hand. Mara turned. He looked guilty again. "What?" "My message. The bakery message. I attached the station emergency tag." Mara stared. "You sent a distress packet." "I thought it went nowhere." "It reached a Terran hospital ship." Tio's eyes widened. "That is significantly better than my usual networking results." Mara laughed. Actually laughed. In a dark maintenance tunnel, while armed soldiers searched for them. Then Sen said, "Will they fight security?" The laughter disappeared. Mara kept moving. "No." "How do you know?" "Because Mercy Bell is a hospital ship." "That does not answer the question." Mara thought of Terran doctrine. Human military vessels had learned hard lessons during the war. Rescue ships were protected by treaty. Their crews were armed only for self-defense. They would not start a firefight on a civilian station. But they would come. That mattered. "They'll make Varro choose whether he wants witnesses," she said. Tio understood. If he shoots at medics, everyone sees what he is. "Exactly." Sen's expression turned grim. "If he is desperate enough, that may not stop him." Mara did not answer. The conduit opened into the astronomy tower's service level at 0951. They climbed out into darkness. The lab above contained 6 survey probes docked in vertical launch cradles. Each was a narrow silver cylinder with folding sensor wings and a microfusion drive. Tio looked like he had entered a temple. "Model 7s. Mara glanced at him. "Useful. Beautiful. Useful. Yes." They moved to the control station. Network access was blocked. Tio plugged in Mara's diagnostic lead. His hands shook. Mara noticed. He noticed her noticing. "Fear is useful," he said. She nodded. "Good memory." Sen removed the hidden archive filament from the recorder. For a moment he held the outer shell too. Leia's voice remained on it. Mara watched his fingers tighten. "You don't have to send the recorder," she said. "The archive is linked to the original encryption key. Can you separate it?" Tio looked over. "Maybe." "How long?" 10 minutes. Boots sounded in the lower stairwell. Mara looked at him. Tio corrected himself. "Not 10 minutes." Sen closed his eyes. Then he placed the entire recorder into the probe's data compartment. Mara understood what that cost. "You sure?" "No." He sealed the compartment. "But send it." Tio worked. The probe woke with a soft rising hum. Launch doors remained locked. "Security override," he said. "Can you break it?" "I can insult it." "Tio." "I'm working." The stairwell door opened below. Mara moved to the lab entrance. "No weapon." Again. She scanned the room. "Tools." Equipment. A compressed gas line. Emergency shutters. She grabbed a long calibration bar. Sen looked at it. Is that your plan? No. What is it? It makes me feel better. The first security soldier appeared at the far end of the corridor. Mara stepped into view. The rifle came up. Down, he shouted. Mara raised her empty left hand and kept the calibration bar low in her right. I'm unarmed. Drop the object. She dropped it. 2 more soldiers appeared. Not the fake Dominion operatives. Regular galactic security. Young. Nervous. Good. Nervous people could still think. Mara said, there are civilians in this lab. You are ordered to surrender. By Director Varro. Yes. You heard the hospital ship. The soldier's aim shifted slightly. I heard it. Then you know medics are coming. Get on your knees. Mara did not move. The soldier's finger tightened near the trigger. Behind her, Tia whispered, almost. Mara kept her eyes on the soldier. What's your name? Down. Your name. His jaw tightened. Kale. All right, Kale, I'm Mara. I know who you are. You know a file. The rifle stayed steady. Mara continued. There are students downstairs who have already been shot. There is a medical ship outside. If you fire here, you need to know why. My orders. I had orders too. Kale's face changed slightly. Mara recognized the opening. I followed good ones. I followed stupid ones. Once I followed one I still wake up thinking about. So before you pull that trigger, do yourself a favor and understand whose fear you are carrying. One of the soldiers behind Kale whispered, Sir, Mercy Bell is requesting corridor access again. Kale did not look away. Mara said, let them in. I cannot. You can. No. You mean you're afraid to? His rifle jerked higher. Sen moved behind Mara. She held out one hand without turning. Stay. Kale's breathing became audible. Then Director Varro spoke through his helmet. Lieutenant Kale, detain Ven immediately. Lethal authorization granted. The words echoed from the soldier's external speaker. Everyone heard them. Tio stopped typing. Kale's face went white. Mara stared at him. There it was. The bad second. The one before a life became permanent. Lieutenant, Mara said softly, you have a choice. Varro's voice snapped, execute the order. Kale's rifle trembled. Then he lowered it. No, he said. The 2 soldiers behind him stared. Kale touched his helmet control. Command, I am refusing lethal action against an unarmed civilian. Varro's voice became cold. You are relieved. Kale removed his helmet. Fine. The second soldier lowered her rifle. Then the third. Mara exhaled. Tia whispered, probe ready. The launch doors opened. Stars appeared beyond the transparent safety field. Sen stood beside the probe. His face crumpled for 1 second when he looked at the recorder inside. Mara touched his shoulder. Say goodbye. He laughed bitterly, again. Yes. Sen put his hand against the probe casing. Go farther than we did, Leia. Tio pressed launch. The probe fired upward. It vanished into black space. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then the control screen flashed red. Tracking intercept detected. A security defense drone had locked onto the probe. Tio swore. Mara lunged toward the console. The display showed the probe climbing away from Caro Station. A fast interceptor launched from the security cruiser. Time to contact, 18 seconds. Sen stared. No. Tio typed wildly. I can change vector. Do it. The probe is slower. Do it anyway. 15 seconds. The survey probe rolled toward Seleni's upper atmosphere. The interceptor followed. 12. 10. Then another object crossed the display. Vast. Terran transponder. A small medical shuttle from Mercy Bell moved directly between the interceptor and the probe. Tio froze. They're blocking the shot. Mara stared at the screen. The security interceptor broke off. It could not fire without risking a hospital shuttle. The probe accelerated towards Selene. Signal range widened. 1 minute later, it transmitted a confirmation. Data relay established. Sen sat down on the floor. Not gracefully. His knees simply stopped holding him. Mara crouched beside him. It's out. He covered his face. The recording too. I know. He cried silently. Mara stayed beside him. She did not tell him it was worth it. Some sacrifices could be necessary without becoming fair. Above them, the station shook again. This time, the sound was different. Not weapons. Docking clamps releasing. Tio looked at the display. Security ships are moving. Mara stood. For half a second, she thought Varro was retreating. Then the external tactical feed updated. 3 galactic security cutters detached from Caro Station and repositioned around Mercy Bell. A 4th remained docked. Saul's voice suddenly came through a local comm channel. Mara, answer. She grabbed the console mic. Saul. Static. Then we are in the East Lab. Professor is safe. Mara closed her eyes briefly. Good. Listen to me. Varro issued station-wide emergency authority. He is calling the hospital ship an armed interference vessel. Mara looked at the tactical display. That's insane. Yes. What is he doing? Saul's voice broke through static. He is ordering all loyal units to secure the Central Forum and prepare for Terran boarding. Mara's blood went cold. We're not boarding. I know. Then another voice cut into the channel. Professor Ilian. Mara. I'm here. The students in the forum are still trapped. Mara looked toward the door. Ilian continued. Varro is placing armed troops among them. Human medics were preparing to come aboard. Galactic security was surrounding civilians. Mara understood the shape of the trap. If Terran personnel entered and anything went wrong, Varro could claim the humans attacked a lawful security operation. If they stayed outside, he kept control of the witnesses. Sen wiped his face and stood. The evidence is gone. He has lost. Mara shook her head. No. What else does he want? To control the story before the evidence arrives. Tio stared at her. How? Mara looked at the tactical display. Then at the campus map on the wall. He needs violence. Nobody spoke. Mara continued. He needs Terran soldiers firing on galactic security in front of hundreds of students. Then Rill becomes secondary. He becomes the official who defended a neutral station from human aggression. Kale, the lieutenant who had lowered his weapon, whispered he would sacrifice his own troops. Mara looked at him. You know the answer. Kale sat heavily on a console edge. One of his soldiers muttered, God. Mara's wrist screen flashed. The district network came alive for 1 second. A message from Mercy Bell. Medical TEAMS requests safe entry route. Civilian casualties confirmed. Mara stared at it. Tio asked, what do we do? She thought of the forum. Hundreds of students. Terrified soldiers. A director who needed somebody to fire first. Then she looked at Kale. How many security troops will follow you instead of Varro? He gave a humorless laugh. 5 minutes ago. None. And now? Kale looked at the two soldiers behind him. The woman said, I'm not shooting students. The other soldier nodded. Kale took a breath. Maybe more than none. Mara picked up her mechanical pencil from her coat pocket. Tio stared. Now. I think better when I write. She pulled a blank astronomy worksheet from the printer tray. On the back she drew the central forum. Entrances. Balconies. Service corridors. Medical access points. She marked where she had seen troops. Sen watched. What are you planning? Mara drew one more line. Not a fight. Tio looked relieved for half a second. Then suspicious. What is it? Mara tapped the pencil against the paper. A classroom exercise. No one understood. She looked at them. Varro wants soldiers and civilians separated into two groups, armed people and helpless people. That makes violence easy. Kale frowned. So we ruin the categories. How? Mara looked toward the campus loudspeaker controls. Meridian has 20,000 students. Most are locked down. Yes. They are civilians. Yes. Tio slowly began to smile. Oh. Mara nodded. Exactly. Sen looked between them. I do not understand. Tio said, she wants the school to act like a school. Mara picked up the console microphone. The campus emergency broadcast required administrative credentials. Professor Ilian still had them. Saul patched him through. Ilian listened to Mara's idea in silence. When she finished, he said, that is irresponsible. Yes. Dangerous. Yes. Potentially grounds for expulsion. Mara smiled despite herself. Probably. The professor sighed. Then he gave her the access code. At 10:17, every speaker in Meridian Institute clicked on. Students expected another security order. Instead, they heard Mara's voice. She had spoken through battlefields before. She had shouted over gunfire. She had given casualty reports with blood on her hands. This was harder. My name is Mara Venn. I'm a second-year engineering student. She paused. Tio mouthed, good start. Mara resisted the urge to kick him. Some of you know I served in the war. Galactic security is telling you I'm dangerous. They're telling you Sen Arak is a spy. Right now, I can't prove every part of what's happening. She looked through the lab window at the stars. But I can tell you this. Evidence connected to the real camp has left this station. A legitimate tribunal will receive it. Sen closed his eyes. Mara continued. Security Director Varro needs this campus frightened. He needs people running. He needs soldiers believing every student is a threat and students believing every soldier is an enemy. Her hand tightened around the microphone. Do not give him that. The station was silent around her. If you are in a classroom, stay there unless your route is safe. If you are near an injured person, help them. If you can display your student identification, do it. If you have cameras, record openly. No hidden movements. No rushing soldiers. No weapons. Kale watched her. Myra took a breath. And if a soldier tells you to sit, sit. Then ask their name. Ask where they went to school. Ask whether they know why they are here. Tio's expression changed. That part had not been in the plan. Neither had the next. To the galactic security personnel on campus, I know some of you can hear me. I know what it is like to be given an order when everyone around you is frightened. You do not have to become the worst thing someone above you is willing to request. Mara's voice trembled. She let it. You can protect this station without hurting the people on it. She looked at Sen. And to the students in the Central Forum, you are not hostages unless you let fear make you silent. You are witnesses. Remember names. Remember faces. Help the person next to you. She swallowed. Class is still in session. Then she cut the transmission. Tio stared at her. That was either brilliant or deeply strange. Probably both. Kale's helmet began receiving messages. 1, then 5, then dozens. He looked at the display. Security personnel across campus were asking for clarification. Some refused Varro's lethal authorization. One squad had opened a medical corridor. Another had removed helmets and begun giving students water. In the Central Forum, students sat down together. Not because Varro ordered them to. Because Mara had. They displayed their identification cards above their heads. Hundreds of small lights filled the glass dome. Name. Course. Home world. Civilian. Witness. Varro's clean division began to collapse. For 10 extraordinary minutes, the occupation stopped behaving like an occupation. Then a shot rang out in the Central Forum. The campus feed caught the sound. Mara froze. A second shot. Screaming. Kale looked at his tactical channel. His face went blank. What? Mara asked. He looked up. Varro's personal unit just fired into the crowd. Mara's stomach dropped. Tio whispered, why? Kale answered. To force the fight. Then the external sensors screamed. Mercy Bell's medical shuttles launched. Security cutters powered weapons. The first shuttle crossed toward the station. Mara stared at the tactical display. Everything Varro wanted was happening at once. She grabbed the calibration bar from the floor. Sen said, you said this wasn't a fight. Mara looked at him. It still is. What do you call it? She opened the lab door. A rescue. They ran toward the forum. Before they left the astronomy lab, Sen caught Mara by the sleeve. Wait. She turned. He was staring at the open launch cradle where the probe had been. The empty rails still glowed faintly from the launch. If we go back to the forum, he said, I want you to understand something. Mara waited. I am tired of being carried. She frowned. At Rill, adults carried me out of buildings. Soldiers carried me onto transports. Aid workers moved me from camp to camp. Since the war, lawyers have moved me between interviews. Security officers have moved me between rooms. Everyone says it is for my protection. His voice stayed controlled, but his hands did not. They decide where I stand when I speak, what I am allowed to know. Even now, you keep putting yourself between me and every door. Mara looked down. He was right. She hated how quickly she had made him into a responsibility instead of a person. What do you want me to do? She asked. Ask. Ask what? Whether I want protection before you decide what it looks like. The words landed harder than accusation. Mara remembered being 21, newly promoted, telling frightened civilians to move faster because the evacuation clock was running. She had saved lives that day. She had also shouted at a mother who would not leave a bag containing her dead son's clothes. Mara had thought urgency made every decision obvious. Years later, she could still see the woman's face. All right, Mara said. Sen watched her carefully. We're going to the forum. It may get dangerous. Do you want to come? Yes. Do you want me in front? He thought about it. When there are rifles, yes. Tio cleared his throat. I also formally request Mara in front when there are rifles. Mara looked at him. This is an important moment. I can respect an important moment and prefer not to be shot. Sen laughed. It was brief but real. Mara nodded to him. Anything else? Yes. What? If Varro speaks to me, do not answer for me. Mara almost objected, then stopped herself. Okay. Sen extended his hand. It took Mara a second to understand, then she shook it. Not soldier and protected witness. Not rescuer and survivor. Two students making an agreement in a damaged astronomy lab. Kale watched from the doorway. You really came back here for school? He asked Mara. She released Sen's hand. That was the idea. Kale glanced at the cracked corridor wall, the abandoned launch cradle, and his own discarded helmet. How is that going? Mara picked up her pencil from the console. I have missed several assignments. Tio said I can send you my notes. You draw cartoons in your notes. They are educational diagrams. Yesterday, you drew Professor Ilian fighting gravity with a chair. Conceptually accurate. For a few seconds, all of them smiled. Then another distant shot echoed through the tower. The smiles vanished. Mara looked at Sen. This time she asked. Ready? He took a breath. No. Mara nodded. Me neither. They went anyway. Mara reached the central forum at 10:31. She remembered the time because, later, everyone argued about when the battle began. The official report said 10:29. Galactic security log said 10:34. Mercy Bell recorded its first medical shuttle docking at 10:32. Mara's notebook said 10:31, written in graphite beside a smear of blood that did not belong to her. She trusted the notebook. The forum no longer looked like a school. Smoke hung beneath the glass dome. A security barricade had been overturned near the north stairs. Hundreds of students were pressed behind benches and planter walls. Some still held their glowing identity cards above their heads. Others were helping the wounded. 3 people lay near the center fountain. 1 was moving. 2 were not. Mara saw everything in pieces. A dropped backpack. A broken pair of spectacles. A VR student holding his own sleeve against a stranger's shoulder wound. A security soldier crying while trying to reload a weapon with shaking hands. Director Varro stood on the far platform, surrounded by 8 members of his personal unit. Their armor was darker than the ordinary security troops. No station insignia. No visible names. That told Mara enough. Kale came through the doorway behind her with his 2 soldiers. Sen and Tio followed. Mara looked back at Sen. He nodded once. He had asked her not to make his decisions. She turned toward the forum. Stay low, she said. Tio crouched immediately. Sen said that sounded like an order. It was a suggestion with excellent reasoning. He crouched too. A shot cracked across the dome. Mara dropped behind a pillar. The round struck the wall above them. Kale shouted, "Security, hold fire." Varro's personal troops ignored him. 1 advanced along the upper balcony. Mara watched his movement. 2 controlled. Former special operations, she thought. Not ordinary police. A second soldier moved to flank the student crowd. They were manufacturing panic. Varro raised a speaker. Former Sergeant Venn, surrender immediately. You have incited armed resistance against galactic authority. Mara looked around. The only armed resistance she could see came from his own men. She shouted back, "I'm not armed." Varro smiled without humor. "You are a trained combatant. That is not the same thing." "It is today." Mara's eyes moved to the western entrance. A red medical light flashed beyond the sealed doors. Mercy Bell's team was there. Locked out. Students between. Varro's troops covering the doors. The geometry was obvious. If the medics forced entry, Varro's men would fire. Security units would respond. Terran escorts might return fire. Hundreds of civilians would be trapped between them. Mara felt the old battlefield certainty try to take over. Find the threat. Break the threat. Move. She forced herself to remain still. The hardest thing she had learned after the war was that speed and wisdom were not the same. Kale crouched beside her. His personal unit won't obey me. How many regular security troops are in the forum? Maybe 20. Will they obey Varro? Some. Will they shoot students? Kale looked toward the young soldier who had been crying while reloading. I don't know. Then we make sure they don't have to decide alone. Mara looked at Tio. Can you get the forum display system? He stared at her while being shot at. Yes. Your confidence in me is becoming inconvenient. Can you? He looked toward a maintenance console 15 meters away. Probably. Do it. Sen grabbed Tio's arm. I'll go. Mara started to object. Then remembered the astronomy lab. Ask. She looked at Sen. You want to? Yes. Then go together. Stay behind the planter line. They moved. Mara turned to Kale. I need the west medical doors open. They are under command lock. Local release. Security kiosk near the fountain. The fountain sat in open ground. 30 meters. Varro's unit had a clear line of fire. Kale followed her gaze. No. Mara looked at him. You said trust meant something if we survived. Yes. I trust you enough to tell you that is a terrible idea. Good. You're still going. Yes. Kale sighed. I am beginning to understand why your professors look tired. Mara moved before he could stop her. She ran low across the first 10 meters. A shot hit the floor behind her. Students screamed. She slid behind an overturned table. The old Mara, the sergeant, began measuring fire rhythm. Shooter on balcony. 3-second reset. Second shooter near platform. Crossing angle limited by fountain sculpture. She hated how easy it was. She loved that it kept her alive. Another shot. She moved. A student reached for her from behind a bench. Mara almost shoved the hand away. Then recognized the boy from earlier, the one with blood on his forehead. He held out a fallen security shield. For you, he said. Mara took it. Thank you. The shield was light composite, designed for crowd control, not military fire. Still better than nothing. She reached the fountain. The kiosk was on the other side. A galactic security trooper crouched behind it. He raised his rifle when Mara appeared. She froze. Young Orinth, purple stripe on his jaw. His muzzle trembled. Mara held the shield aside so he could see her empty hand. What's your name? His breathing hitched. She almost laughed at the absurdity of repeating the same question. Stay back. Name. Corin. All right, Corin, I need that door control. No. There are medics outside. I know. There are wounded students behind me. I know. Then help them. His eyes flicked toward Varro. Mara understood. You think he'll arrest you? Corin whispered, he'll do worse. Mara crouched so she was not towering over him. I can't promise he won't. His weapon remained on her. She continued, but there is a hospital ship outside. There are cameras everywhere. The records are already off station. This doesn't disappear now. Corin's jaw tightened. A voice shouted from Varro's platform. Trooper, detain her. Corin looked at Myra, then at the wounded students. Then he reached behind him and hit the manual medical release. The west doors opened. Varro screamed, close them. Too late. Mercy Bell's medics entered at a run. They wore white pressure armor marked with enormous red medical symbols. No rifles, no tactical shields, just trauma packs, portable stretchers, and 2 compact surgical drones rolling beside them. The first medic did not look at Varro. She ran straight toward the nearest wounded student. That single act changed the room. Mara saw it happen. Galactic security troops who had been aiming across the forum lowered their weapons to let the medics pass. Students stopped running. One soldier moved a barricade out of the way. Another knelt beside a medic and started applying pressure to a wound. Varro's clean division broke again. He needed enemies. Instead, he had people helping people. His face changed. Arrest the Terran personnel, he ordered. Nobody moved. Varro looked at the nearest regular security squad. That is a direct order. Their lieutenant stared at the medics. One was intubating a Karth student on the floor. The lieutenant lowered his rifle. No, sir. Mara exhaled. Then one of Varro's personal soldiers raised his weapon and shot the lieutenant in the chest. The forum exploded. Students screamed. Security troops spun toward the platform. Mara saw 3 rifles rise. This was it. The moment Varro had been trying to create. Galactic security against galactic security. Terran medics in the middle. One shot away from massacre. Mara climbed onto the fountain edge and shouted with everything left in her lungs. Don't fire. The words cracked across the dome. Somebody listened. Then another. A rifle lowered. Kale ran into the open. Security units hold fire. Personal detail is rogue. Hold fire. Varro's men began shooting anyway. Not into the crowd now. At security troops who refused orders. At Kale. At Mara. Mara jumped from the fountain as rounds struck the stone. There was no avoiding the fight anymore. But there was still a difference between fighting and losing control. She grabbed Corin's shoulder. Protect the medics. He nodded. Mara ran toward the lower platform. Kale's people moved with her. They did not fire into the crowd. They advanced behind shields, using benches and pillars for cover. Varro's unit had military weapons. Kale's troops had restraint rifles and stun launchers. Bad match. Mara knew something they did not. The central forum had been built over the original station Arboretum. Its environmental systems were independent. She had learned that during first-year engineering when her project team accidentally triggered a humidity warning and flooded an entire presentation with artificial fog. At the time, Professor Ilian had given them a terrible grade. Now the memory might save lives. She reached Tio's position. He had opened the display console. Sen was beside him. Can you access environmental control? Mara asked. Tio looked horrified. You want to vent the forum? No fog. He blinked. The Arboretum mist system. Understanding flashed across his face. That still exists. Please tell me you can find out. Tio dove into the controls. Sen looked at Mara. Varro is moving. She turned. Director Varro was leaving the platform through the east corridor with 4 personal troops. He had lost control of the ordinary security units. So he was running. Sen started after him. Mara caught his arm. He pulled away. You said you would ask. Myra forced herself to let go. Do you want to follow him? Yes. Why? Because he knows my father's name. That is not enough. It is to me. Myra looked at him. He was angry now. Not frightened. That worried her differently. Then I'm coming. That is not asking. I am not asking permission for my own choice. Sen stared at her. Then, despite everything, he gave a brief nod. Fair. Tio shouted, found it. Myra turned. He slammed his palm onto the control. The forum ceiling hissed. Thousands of microscopic nozzles opened. A warm silver mist poured into the dome. Within seconds, visibility dropped. Varro's personal troops lost their long firing lanes. Students disappeared behind white haze. Security officers began shouting positions. Medics switched on beacon lights. Kale laughed once over the comm. What did you do? Engineering. I take back anything I ever said about university being useless. Marasen and Tio moved east. They found Professor Ilian and Saul near the corridor entrance. Ilian had acquired a security helmet. It sat badly on his narrow Orinth head. Mara stared at him. He said, do not comment. I wasn't going to. You were. Saul had a restraint pistol. He pointed down the corridor. Varro is heading for Dock 6. Ship, Mara asked. His command cutter. Sen's face hardened. He's escaping. Saul nodded. Probably taking the remaining archive backups from security systems. Mara looked at him. Backups. Anything his people seized from tribunal communications. Sen said, then we stop him. Professor Ilian drew himself up. I am coming. Mara looked at his slippers. One had torn across the toe. No. I object. Noted. You cannot simply. A nearby medic interrupted. Professor, I need help carrying patients to the south shelter. Ilian looked at the medic. Then at Mara. He understood the manipulation immediately. His eyes narrowed. Mara gave him an innocent look. I dislike you, he said. I'll see you in class. The professor's expression changed. For a moment, the chaos around them disappeared. See that you do, he said. Mara sent Tio, and Saul entered the east corridor. Kale stayed to coordinate security units and protect the medics. The corridor lights flickered from damage. Smoke drifted through ventilation grills. They passed abandoned classrooms. A lecture projection still floated in one room, displaying a poem in 3 languages. Mara caught one translated line as she ran past. We become what we carry through the fire. She almost stopped. Later, she would search for the poem and discover the translation was bad. At the time, it felt perfect. They reached Dock 6 access at 10:46. The blast doors were closing. Saul sprinted ahead and jammed his restraint pistol into the track. The mechanism crushed the weapon. But the door stopped with a gap half a meter wide. Tio stared. That was expensive. Saul grunted, government property. Mara squeezed through first. A shot struck the wall beside her. She dropped. 2 of Varro's troops were on the docking bridge. One fired again. Mara rolled behind a cargo console. Sen and Tio stayed behind the door. Saul slipped through beside her. We need weapons, he said. No lethal fire unless they force it. They are shooting at us. I noticed. A round tore through the console edge. Saul gave her a look. Your standards are demanding. Mara scanned the dock. Cargo loaders. Magnetic clamps. Emergency pressure doors. A maintenance exoskeleton stood charging near the wall. Not a combat suit. Industrial. Designed to lift engine parts. Mara smiled. Saul followed her gaze. No. Yes. You are an engineering student. Exactly. She crawled toward the suit, while Saul fired restraint pulses to keep the soldiers behind cover. The exoskeleton was old, bulky, and painted yellow. Its left manipulator arm had a warning label that read "Do not operate above 40% torque without stabilizer lock." Mara climbed in. The suit recognized her student maintenance credentials from 4 years earlier. She stared at the display. "You have got to be kidding me." Tio shouted from the doorway. "What?" "My access still works. Meridian administration is very bad at account cleanup. Remind me to complain." The exoskeleton powered up. Its boots magnetized to the deck. Mara lifted the cargo shield with one manipulator. It weighed nearly 400 kilograms. In the suit, it felt like a chair. She stepped into the open. The soldiers fired. Rounds hammered the shield. Mara advanced. Not fast. The suit could not run. That made the scene almost ridiculous. A yellow maintenance machine walking down a docking bridge under rifle fire. Tio began laughing behind the blast door. Sen shouted, "Why are you laughing?" "I am frightened beyond reason." "That is not an explanation." "It is for humans." Mara heard them and almost laughed too. The first soldier retreated. The second kept firing. Mara closed distance. At 5 meters, she swung the shield sideways, not at him, but at his cover. The cargo crate slid across the deck and knocked him off balance. Saul fired a restraint pulse. The soldier dropped. The other raised his rifle. Mara opened the exoskeleton's empty manipulator hand. "Stop." He fired. The round hit the suit's shoulder. Warning lights flashed. Mara kept walking. He fired again. She reached him and grabbed the rifle barrel with the industrial clamp. The weapon bent. Not dramatically. Just a slow mechanical crunch. The soldier stared at it. Then at Mara inside the suit. She said, "Please don't make me repair that." He dropped the weapon. Saul stunned him. Tio and Sen squeezed through the door. Tio looked at the bent rifle. "You made a joke." "I make jokes. You make threats disguised as technical observations." "That counts." The command cutter sat at the end of the dock. Its engines were powering. Varro was aboard. Dock clamps began releasing. Mara checked the exoskeleton display. 31% power. Damaged shoulder. Enough. She marched toward the ship. Saul caught up. "If it launches, we lose him." "No." "What do you mean, no?" Mara pointed at the fuel umbilical. The cutter had disconnected power, but not the emergency coolant feed. Launching with the line attached would trigger an automatic abort. Varro's pilot knew that. The line began retracting. Mara moved faster. The exoskeleton groaned. 40% torque warning. She ignored it. The coolant line pulled free of the ship. Mara grabbed it with the suit's manipulator and jammed the coupling into the docklock bracket. The system detected an unresolved connection. ALARMS exploded across the bridge. Cutter launch inhibited. Tio whooped. Then the cutter's side hatch opened. A man fired from inside. The shot hit the exoskeleton chest. Mara's harness slammed into her ribs. She fell backward. The suit crashed onto the deck. Everything went white for a second. Sound disappeared, then returned as a high ringing tone. She tasted blood. "Mara." Sen's voice. She tried to move. The suit did not respond. Emergency release. Her hand found it. Nothing. Bent frame. She was trapped. Saul dragged Sin behind cover as more rounds came from the cutter. Tio crawled toward Mara. She shouted, "Stay back." He ignored her. Of course he did. He reached the suit and pulled at the manual release. "It's jammed." "I noticed." Sen slid beside him. Together they worked the damaged latch. Mara looked toward the cutter. 2 troops were moving out. Saul fired restraint pulses. One ducked. The other advanced. "Faster," Mara said. Tio looked at her, useful feedback. The latch moved. Sen pulled. The harness released. Mara rolled out of the suit as a round struck its frame. She landed hard. Pain flashed through her ribs. Sen grabbed her arm. "Can you stand?" "Yes." That was a lie. She stood anyway. The nearest enemy soldier reached them. He swung his rifle toward Sen. Mara moved before thought. She caught the barrel, turned with it, and drove her shoulder into the soldier's chest. Old training. Simple. Ugly. He struck her ribs. Pain exploded. She held on. Sen kicked the soldier's knee. Tio grabbed the fallen restraint pistol from Saul's old holster and fired it by accident into the ceiling. Everyone froze for half a second. Tio stared at the weapon. "I hate this." Mara gasped, "Point it lower." He did. The soldier turned toward him. Tio fired again. This time the pulse hit. The soldier collapsed. Tio looked horrified. "I shot someone. He'll wake up." "I still shot him." "Yes." Tio's hands shook violently. Mara took the weapon from him. "You don't have to be okay with it." That seemed to help more than telling him he had done well. The cutter hatch remained open. No more soldiers came out. Saul approached from the opposite side. One left inside with Varro, maybe 2. Mara handed him the restraint pistol. "I'm going in." Sen said, "So am I." "No." He stared at her. Mara stopped. "Old habit." She corrected herself. "Do you want to?" "Yes." "Then stay behind Saul until we know the cabin is clear." Sen nodded. Tio said, "I would like to formally choose staying outside." Mara looked at him. "That is an excellent decision." He sank against the dock wall. Finally, Mara entered the cutter. The interior smelled of hot circuitry and weapon coolant. She knew military ships. Different manufacturer, same logic. Narrow corridor to command cabin. Crew bunk alcove. Equipment locker. Escape capsule access. Varro would go to the escape capsule if the main launch remained blocked. Mara turned left. A security operative stepped from the bunk alcove. He had a shock baton instead of a rifle. Smart. Too close for shooting. He swung. Mara blocked with her forearm. Pain shot to her shoulder. He was larger. Fresh. She was exhausted and probably had cracked ribs. The old part of Mara began calculating again. Elbow joint. Knee. Throat. Eyes. Ways to end a fight permanently. She saw the options as clearly as words on a page, and chose none of them. She stepped inside his next swing, caught his wrist, and drove him into the wall. He struck her jaw. She saw stars. He raised the baton. Mara trapped his arm under hers and kicked the back of his ankle. He fell. She went down with him. They wrestled in the narrow corridor. No grace. No cinematic perfection. His elbow hit her mouth. She bit her lip. Her knee slipped on the deck. He nearly got the baton free. Then Saul appeared and fired a restraint pulse into his shoulder. The operative went limp. Myra lay on the floor breathing hard. Saul looked down at her. "You were a boarding sergeant." "Yes. I expected that to look cleaner." Myra wiped blood from her mouth. "Recruitment videos lie." Sen stepped over the unconscious man. "Varro." Mara pointed aft. They reached the escape capsule. The hatch was open. Director Varro stood inside. He held a pistol against his own navigation officer's neck. The officer was a young Fen woman, terrified. Varro's uniform was torn at the shoulder. His calm public face was gone. "Stop," he said. Myra stopped. Saul raised the restraint pistol. Varro pressed his weapon harder against the officer. "Drop it." Saul looked at Myra. She nodded. He lowered the pistol to the deck. Varro laughed once. "You people never learn." Myra leaned against the wall to keep pressure off her ribs. "What lesson did I miss?" "That power is the only thing that survives peace." Sen stepped forward. Mara glanced at him. He shook his head slightly. "Do not answer for me." She stayed silent. Varro saw Sen. His expression changed. "There you are." Sen's voice was steady. "You knew my father." Varro smiled. "Your father was a clerk who mistook access for importance. He copied your orders. He copied many things. You authorized the transports from Rill." Varro looked bored. "I authorized security measures during an insurgency. My sister was 16. Something flickered in Varro's face. Not remorse. Irritation. War kills children. Mara's hands curled. Sen remained still. "No," he said, "people kill children during war. Then they use the war as grammar so they do not have to say who did what." Varro stared at him. Mara felt something in the room shift. Sen was no longer the boy she had pulled behind walls. He was a witness. Not because a tribunal had named him one. Because he had chosen to speak. Varro said, "Your evidence will never survive authentication." Sen's mouth tightened. It already reached Judge Senral. For the first time, Varro looked afraid. "You're lying." Sen did not blink. "You should have learned more about astronomy probes." Mara almost smiled. Varro's pistol shifted. The Fen navigation officer whimpered. Mara focused on his hand. Index finger tight. Elbow locked. Distance 4 meters. Too far to rush cleanly. Saul's weapon on floor 2 meters to her right. Bad angle. Send too close. Varro said, "I leave now. The student comes with me." Sen answered before Mara could. "No." Varro's eyes narrowed. "You think she can save you?" Sen glanced at Mara. "No." Then he looked back at Varro. "I think she finally understands she does not have to." Mara felt the words in her chest. Varro did not understand them. He saw hesitation as weakness. That was his mistake. The navigation officer suddenly dropped her weight. Not much. Just enough. Varro's pistol moved off her neck. Mara crossed the distance. She hit his wrist with both hands. The weapon fired. The shot struck the ceiling. Saul lunged for the officer and pulled her aside. Varro drove his head into Mara's face. Pain exploded through her nose. She stumbled. He raised the pistol again. Sen grabbed his arm. Varro struck him. Sen fell. Mara saw red. A clear, terrible red. The old training offered answers. Break the wrist. Crush the throat. End it. She caught Varro's gun hand. Twisted. He screamed. The pistol fell. Mara had his arm locked. One more movement would break the elbow. She knew exactly how much pressure. Varro knew too. He looked at her. Do it. Mara froze. His face was inches from hers. Do it, he said again, almost smiling. Show them what you are. There it was. The trap beneath every other trap. He wanted proof that violence was inevitable. That humans were only dangerous animals, wearing uniforms when convenient. That peace was a pause between stronger people hurting weaker ones. Mara released pressure. Not completely. Enough not to break him. Varro's smile disappeared. She forced him to his knees. No, she said. He struggled. She held him. You don't get to decide what I am. Saul recovered the pistol. He secured Varro's wrists. Sen stood slowly, blood at the corner of his mouth. He looked at Mara. She looked back. No triumph. Just exhaustion. Director Varro knelt on the floor of his own escape capsule, alive. For Mara, that mattered. Not because he deserved mercy. She had stopped believing mercy needed to be earned. It mattered because she did not want another dead man living inside her head. The station stabilized by noon. Not cleanly. Nothing important ended cleanly anymore. Varro's remaining personal troops surrendered when the tribunal issued an emergency warrant based on the archive Sen had launched. The security cutters surrounding Mercy Bell stood down after their crews received the warrant through independent civilian channels. 27 galactic security officers refused Varro's orders before the end. 9 were wounded. 3 students died in the forum. Mara learned their names that evening. She wrote them in her notebook. Ari Meals, Juno Far, Pethuran. She did not know any of them. She wrote the names anyway. Mercy Bell's medics treated more than 50 people. Mara was one of the last because she kept insisting other people were worse. A medic with a shaved head finally grabbed her by the coat and said, "If you walk away again, I will sedate you in public." Mara sat down. Tio laughed until his side hurt. Then he admitted his side, already hurt from crawling through maintenance shafts. The medic examined him too. Sen had a cracked cheekbone. Saul had 2 burns on his shoulder. Professor Ilian had a blister from his slippers. He complained about it more than anyone else complained about anything. Nessa arrived at the medical shelter carrying 6 trays of fresh bread. Nobody understood how she had restarted the bakery during a station lockdown. Nessa considered explanations unnecessary. She found Mara sitting on a treatment cot with a compression wrap around her ribs. "You came back," Nessa said. Mara looked at her. "So did you." "I never left." "Technically." Nessa handed her a pastry. Mara took it. For several minutes they said nothing. The forum beyond the medical partition was full of voices. Students finding friends. Security officers giving statements. Medics calling for supplies. Someone crying. Someone laughing too loudly. Life returning in ugly pieces. Mara understood that rhythm. She had seen cities do it after bombardments. She had never imagined a university would sound the same. 3 days later, Meridian Institute closed for a week. The official message called it a period of recovery and institutional review. Tio called it the administration finally admitting nobody had done the homework. Mara slept for almost 14 hours the first night. When she woke, she panicked because she did not know where she was. Then she smelled bread from downstairs. The room came back. Her desk. The round window. The mag tram sliding silently beyond the glass. Home or something approaching it. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at her left hand. It was trembling. For once she did not hide it. She made tea. Then she opened her notebook. The last pages were chaos. Times. Names. Diagrams. A smear of blood. The line she had written before the lockdown. This time, I know what I'm protecting. Mara read it for a long time. Then crossed out one word. Protecting. Above it she wrote. Choosing. This time, I know what I'm choosing. It felt more accurate. A week later, Sen testified before the Reconstruction Tribunal from a secure chamber on Selene. The hearing was public. Mara watched from Nessa's bakery with Tio, Professor Ilian, and half the engineering department. Sen sat beneath bright white lights wearing a plain dark jacket. No uniform. No dramatic insignia. He looked tired. Human, Mara thought automatically. Then corrected herself. Not human. A person. That correction mattered. The tribunal authenticated the archive. It contained transport orders from RIL, security directives, private communications, and authorization chains linking Dominion officers to several officials, who later entered treaty security under Reconstruction agreements. Director Varro's name appeared 31 times. The hearing lasted 6 hours. At one point Sen was asked why he had preserved the archive inside his sister's recorder. He looked down for a long time. Then said, because my father understood something the people hunting us did not. They thought memory was weakness. He knew memory was where we kept the evidence that we had been people before they made us victims. The bakery became silent. Mara looked at Nessa. The old Callan woman wiped her eyes angrily and pretended flour had gotten into them. Tio did not pretend. He cried openly. Professor Ilian removed his spectacles. Mara looked at him. He said, they are dirty. She smiled. The tribunal ordered Varro detained pending trial. Several security officials resigned. Others were arrested. The story spread across treaty space. News feeds called it the Meridian Crisis. They used footage of Mara in the yellow maintenance exoskeleton because apparently that image tested well with audiences. Mara hated it. Tio loved it. Someone made a shirt. Mara threatened to throw Tio at an airlock when he bought one. You are not in the military anymore, he reminded her. Airlocks exist in civilian infrastructure. That is concerning. The news wanted interviews. Mara refused all of them. One network offered enough money to pay her tuition through graduation. She refused that too. Nessa called her an idiot. Professor Ilian quietly arranged a veteran academic grant that covered most of the same cost. Mara found out only because the financial office sent a confirmation message. She confronted him after class. You did this. Ilian kept writing equations on the board. I signed a form. You nominated me. I signed many forms. Professor. He turned. You returned to school after 4 years of war, prevented a massacre, assisted a tribunal witness, and still managed to submit your bridge analysis only 2 days late. Mara stared. He added, the bridge analysis was mediocre. She laughed. Thank you. Improve section 4. Normal life again. Small pieces. But it was not the same normal. For weeks, students recognized her in hallways. Some thanked her. Some stared. A few asked if she could teach them self-defense. Mara said no. Instead, she worked with Kale and the campus marshals to create a civilian emergency course. Not combat. Evacuation routes. First aid. How to recognize dangerous crowd behavior. How to record abuse without escalating it. How to speak to frightened armed people. Tio named the course Practical Survival for people who would prefer not to need it. The administration shortened the title. Nobody used the official one. Kale remained in galactic security. That surprised Mara. He testified against Varro and requested reassignment to civilian oversight. When Mara asked why he did not quit, he said, "Because bad institutions do not improve when every decent person leaves." Mara thought about that for days. Saul's situation was harder. He had cooperated with Varro under threat to his daughter. He had also helped Mara sin, and the students after the truth became clear. The tribunal charged him with unlawful detention conspiracy, but recommended leniency based on coercion and cooperation. Mara attended his hearing. Saul looked embarrassed when he saw her. Afterward, they sat outside the courthouse on Selene, beneath actual sunlight. Mara had forgotten how different real sunlight felt from station illumination. Saul handed her something. Her paper campus map, folded along the same lines. One corner stained with smoke. "You said you would return it," Mara said. "I try to keep manageable promises." She opened the map. He had written one note near the East Labs. "Bad route, professor complains." Mara laughed. Then Saul's face became serious. "My daughter is safe." "I'm glad." She asked me why I did what they told me. Mara waited. I did not know what to say. "You could tell her you were afraid." "I am supposed to protect her." "You were afraid because you wanted to protect her." Saul looked toward the courthouse steps. "That does not excuse it." "No." He glanced at her. "You could make people feel better if you lied more." "I've been told." They sat quietly. Then Mara said, "Being afraid explains some things. It doesn't erase what they cost. Both can be true." Saul nodded slowly. "Is that what you tell yourself?" Mara looked at her trembling left hand. "Sometimes." He left for Kira Station 2 days later. Mara returned to class. The first morning Meridian reopened. Rain fell against the glass towers. Students gathered at the central forum entrance around a temporary memorial for Ari, Juno, and Peth. 3 simple lights. 3 names. No speeches. Mara stood there before sunrise. Sen joined her. He carried 2 cups of tea. "You drink too much of this," he said. "You brought it." "I can support a bad habit while criticizing it." He handed her a cup. They stood in silence. After a while, Sen said, "I got a message from the tribunal." Mara looked at him. They recovered Leia's recording from the probe memory after copying the archive. Mara felt her chest tighten. "They did." He nodded. "They sent it back." "Have you listened?" "No." "Why?" Sen watched the memorial lights. "I think I wanted the last time to remain the last time." Mara understood that better than she wished. "You don't have to decide today." He nodded. They drank tea. Students began arriving for morning classes. Some slowed at the memorial. Some touched the base. Some hurried past because grief made them uncomfortable. All of it was normal. Mara checked the time. "We're going to be late." Sen looked amazed. "After everything you care." "Ilian will mark attendance." He helped stop a military conspiracy. He also gave me a C-. Terrifying man. They walked toward engineering. At the entrance, A new security guard stood beside the scanner. Mara's body reacted before her mind. Shoulders tight, breath shallow, eyes on hands. The guard noticed. He was human, middle-aged, with a tired mustache and a cup of coffee clipped to his belt. He slowly moved both hands away from his holster. "Morning," he said. Mara stopped. Sin stopped beside her. The guard looked embarrassed. "I read the new training memo," he explained. Mara almost smiled. "Good memo. Very long. That sounds like Meridian." He scanned their student IDs. The gate opened. Mara walked through. Her heart was still beating too fast. But she walked through. That counted. Professor Ilian's classroom had a new window panel where the plasma shot had damaged the old one. The replacement glass was clearer than the surrounding panes. Mara could always see the difference. She took her seat by the window. Tio dropped into the chair beside her. He was wearing the yellow exoskeleton shirt under his jacket. Mara saw part of the printed image. "Take that off. We are in a public institution. I can still throw you through a window. The windows are reinforced. I'm an engineering student. I'll find a way." Sen sat in front of them. Professor Ilian entered exactly 30 seconds before class. He placed his notes on the desk, looked at the students, and said, "Before we begin, I am legally required to inform you that military occupation is not an acceptable reason to ignore assigned reading." The class laughed. Mara laughed with them. For a second, she could hear Selly in the old lift. Not as a ghost, as a memory. There was a difference. Professor Ilian started the lecture. "Today," he said, "we discuss structural resilience." Tio leaned toward Mara. "Subtle." She elbowed him. Ilian drew a bridge on the board. "A common mistake," he said, "is to imagine that the strongest structure is the one that never bends." Mara's pencil stopped. The professor continued. "It is not. A structure that cannot bend transfers stress until something breaks. Resilience is the ability to absorb force, distribute it, change shape where necessary, and still carry what matters." Mara stared at the bridge diagram. Nobody in the room looked at her. For that she was grateful. She wrote the sentence down. Not because it would be on the exam. Because she needed it. Months passed. The war did not vanish from Mara's life. That was not how healing worked. Some nights she still woke at small sounds. Sometimes a dropped metal tray in the cafeteria sent her heart racing. Once, during a campus festival, fireworks started without warning, and Mara found herself crouched beneath a table before she knew she had moved. She was embarrassed. Then Sen crawled under the table beside her with 2 plates of food. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Eating." "You can eat outside." "Yes." He sat anyway. A minute later Tio joined them. Then Nessa, who had come to sell pastries at the festival, looked under the table and said, "If all of you are going to hide here, at least buy something." Mara laughed until the fireworks ended. She began seeing a counselor. That surprised almost everyone except Nessa. Mara told no one at first. Then one afternoon Tio found the appointment card sticking out of her notebook. He looked at it. Mara expected a joke. He only said, "Good." She nearly cried because he did not make it complicated. The counselor was a Draxil man named Raven who had never served in the military. Mara liked that. She had spent years talking to veterans who compared wounds like maps. Raven asked different questions. Not what happened, but what do you do when you remember? Not do you feel guilty, but what does guilt ask you to do? Mara hated him for several weeks. Then she kept going. In spring, she passed structural dynamics. Barely. Professor Ilian handed back the final project with a B-. Mara stared at the grade. You gave Tio a B. He used proper notation. He also drew you falling off a bridge. The drawing was in the appendix. Tio leaned over. Academic professionalism. Mara shook her head. Sen received an A in treaty law that term. He began an internship with the Reconstruction Tribunal. His first assignment involved cataloging displaced person claims from worlds neither of them had heard of. He complained constantly. Mara considered that a good sign. People who believed in institutions should complain when the paperwork was bad. Kale visited campus once a month to teach the emergency course. He and Mara argued about almost everything. Security checkpoints, use of force policy, whether students should be allowed to carry personal stun devices. Their arguments became popular enough that someone started recording them for a public safety seminar. Mara still refused interviews, but she did agree to one short lecture. The title was supposed to be Civilian Resilience During the Meridian Crisis. Mara changed it 5 minutes before speaking. She wrote on the board, How not to turn fear into a weapon. The lecture hall filled. Students sat on the stairs. Security officers stood in back. Veterans came too. Mara walked to the front with her mechanical pencil tucked behind one ear. She looked at the crowd. For a moment her hands shook. Then she began. The first thing people get wrong about bravery is that they think it feels brave. The room became quiet. It usually feels stupid or terrifying, sometimes both. A few people laughed. Mara continued. During the lockdown, everyone later asked what made humans different. News channels used the usual words: aggressive, adaptable, impossible to intimidate. She shook her head. That is flattering and mostly wrong. Kale smiled from the back row. What mattered that day was not that humans were fearless. Tio was terrified. I was terrified. The Mercy Bell medics were not immune to fear. They entered anyway because somebody was bleeding. She paused. Humanity's best habit is not violence. We have plenty of bad history proving that. Our best habit, when we manage it, is that we keep making strangers into people we are responsible to. Sen sat in the front row. Mara looked at him. A student from the species I once fought became my friend. A security officer who helped hunt him later helped save him. Soldiers refused an illegal order because students asked their names. A bakery owner fed people she had never met. A hospital ship put itself between a missile and a school project carrying evidence. Tio whispered loudly. It was a very expensive school project. The audience laughed. Mara smiled. That too. She looked around the room. People ask when the war ended for me. They expect a date, the armistice, my discharge, the day Varro was arrested. Her voice softened. I don't think wars end on one day for the people who carry them home. No one moved. They end in pieces. The first night you sleep through. The first loud noise that is only a loud noise. The first person from the other side whose name you learn. The first time you realize protecting someone does not mean controlling them. Sen looked down. Mara continued. And sometimes they end when you return to a classroom and discover you are allowed to be bad at math again. Professor Ilian, sitting near the aisle, raised one finger. You were never bad at math. Your notation was careless. The room broke into laughter. Mara covered her face for a second. Professor, please. I value accuracy. That lecture became the only recording Mara allowed Meridian to keep. Years later, New students still watched it in the emergency course. They saw a young woman with a scar under her jaw, standing beside a whiteboard with a pencil behind her ear. Most of them knew the legend before they knew the person. The veteran who stopped the Meridian massacre. The human who walked through rifle fire in a maintenance exoskeleton. The soldier who captured Director Varro alive. Mara disliked every version, because none of them included the things she believed mattered. Nessa's bread. Tio shaking hands. Sen asking to be consulted about his own safety. Kale lowering his rifle. Corin opening the medical door. Professor Ilian's torn slipper. The 3 names in her notebook. The ordinary details were what made the story true. 4 years after the Meridian crisis, Mara graduated. It took longer than planned. She changed concentrations once, failed a materials laboratory, and took a semester off to work on a reconstruction habitat above Rill. The first time she returned to that world, Sen went with her. They stood where the camp had once been. Nothing remained except foundation lines and a field of pale grass. Sen played Leia's recording. 12 seconds. Home mother hurry soup. Mara did not understand every word. She did not need to. When it ended, Sen cried. Mara cried too. Then they walked back to the construction site. The new habitat would house 8,000 people. Mara had designed part of its central support ring. Not a monument. A place to live. That mattered more. On graduation day, Meridian's eastern promenade was bright with sunlight reflected from Selene. Thousands of students gathered beneath banners representing dozens of worlds. Mara wore the dark blue engineering robe badly. Tio said she looked like she was being punished by fabric. He had graduated the year before and returned specifically to annoy her. Sen stood with the law faculty. Professor Ilian sat on the stage, spectacles perfectly clean. Nessa occupied an entire row with bakery employees and shouted Mara's name at an inappropriate volume. When Mara crossed the platform, Ilian handed her diploma. He held it for 1 extra second. You know, he said quietly, you were easier to teach before the military occupation. Mara smiled. I wasn't in your class before the military occupation. Exactly. She laughed. Then he let go of the diploma. Mara walked to the edge of the stage. The crowd blurred for a moment. Not from fear. From tears. She saw Tio waving both arms. Sen standing beside him now. Nessa shouting. Kale in the back wearing civilian clothes. Saul had sent a message from Kira Station that morning. His daughter had started university. Mara looked down at the diploma in her hand. A sheet of paper. Again. Like the discharge certificate. One paper had told her a life was over. This one told her another had begun. She thought about the girl in the old profile photograph. 19, long hair, certain about everything. For years Mara had believed returning to school meant finding that girl again. She finally understood she could not. And did not need to. The woman standing on the platform was not who she had been before the war. She carried too much for that. Names. Mistakes. Skills she wished she had never needed. People she could not bring back. People who had helped bring her back. But carrying something was not the same as being crushed by it. Professor Ilian's bridge lesson had been right. Resilience was not refusing to bend. It was learning what could move without breaking, where the load could be shared, and which pieces had to remain strong enough to carry what mattered. Mara stepped down from the stage. Tio hugged her before she could object. Sen joined him. Nessa joined both. Kale pretended not to. Then did. For several seconds, Mara disappeared inside a ridiculous group embrace beneath an alien sky. She laughed so hard her ribs hurt in the old place where they had once been cracked. It was a good hurt. Later that evening, after the ceremony, Mara returned alone to Professor Ilian's classroom. The building was almost empty. Sunset from Selene filled the windows with blue-gold light. She sat in her old seat by the glass. The replacement panel from the shooting was still slightly clearer than the others. Her desk had tiny scratches carved by years of students. Someone had written a formula near the corner. Someone else had drawn a terrible starship. Myra took out her notebook. The first pages were from her return. Class schedules. Equations. 1742, West Gate, watching S. Then the lockdown. The names. The line she had corrected. This time, I know what I'm choosing. She turned to the final blank page. For a while, she did not know what to write. That felt appropriate. Life after war had rarely given her clean conclusions. Finally, she wrote the date. Then one sentence. I came back to finish school, and school finished bringing me home. Myra read it once. Too sentimental. She almost erased it. Then she smiled and left it alone. Outside, the evening bell sounded. Not an alarm. Not a warning. Just the end of class. Myra closed the notebook, stood, and walked toward the door without checking the window first. She noticed that halfway down the hall. She did not turn back.